Chapter 1027. In an instant, the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress worked together. Two beams of white light flashed and formed a transparent ice crystal ball in Schwellinglung's dantian. The cold air trapped the purple pearl and the wisp of true samadhi fire inside. Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a chill in his palm. He immediately realized that Schwellinglong had been frozen into an ice cube. He couldn't help but be shocked. He opened his eyes and looked at the couple. He realized that they were not moving. He knew that his worries were unnecessary. He continued to use his divine sense to observe what was happening inside. The true samadhi fire was happily sucking on the purple pearl. It suddenly realized that its surroundings had changed. The burning flame suddenly stopped. It realized that it was the thing that had almost turned it into nothingness many times. It instantly panicked. The flame trembled violently. It dashed around, but it couldn't break through the layer of ice crystal ball. They finally trapped this damn thing. The couple opened their eyes excitedly. They looked at Yu Qianqiu with gratitude. The Snow Empress was very excited. "Mister, what do we do next?" Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and nodded. "You just need to trap it. Leave the rest to me." The couple nodded and closed their eyes to observe what was happening inside their daughter's body. The purple pearl in Schwellinglung's dantian suddenly rotated slowly. The true samadhi fire that had brushed past it suddenly shrunk to the side of the ice crystal, as if it had seen a ghost. The flame trembled and seemed to be extremely afraid. However, the space sealed by the ice crystal was only so big. It had nowhere to hide even if it wanted to. It could only feel a strong suction force sucking away the energy in its body. As the purple pearl rotated faster and faster, the energy in its body was quickly drained away. It found that its body that had been strengthened with great difficulty was becoming weaker and weaker. "Little fellow, do you think you can eat my stuff so easily? Spit it out with interest no matter how much you eat." Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly in his heart. He could clearly feel that his purple fire pearl was becoming stronger and stronger. The Snow Empress and her husband were also excited. They could feel that the energy of the samadhi true fire was being rapidly absorbed by the purple pearl. The strange tricolored flame was becoming smaller and smaller. It was shivering inside, but it had nowhere to run. In a short while, it had shrunk to the size of a bean. Everyone felt that the end of the little fellow had arrived. However, what surprised everyone was that when the little fellow was almost absorbed, until it was only the size of a spark, it suddenly shot towards the ice crystal like a shooting star. With a sound, it pierced through the ice crystal and instantly disappeared into the wall of Schwellinglung's dantian. Ran away. The three of them shuddered and opened their eyes at the same time. They looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched and his face darkened. He said in a low voice, "Can any of you explain to me what's going on? Didn't you say you could trap it? Could it be that you're playing with me on purpose?" What he wanted to absorb was not the energy of the samadhi true fire, but the spiritual consciousness. He wanted to absorb it and study it properly. He wanted to see if he could fuse it into his own samadhi true fire in advance. He was about to succeed, but this accident happened. Now all his previous efforts were wasted. He couldn't help but be angry. The husband and wife were already dumbfounded. After being at a loss for a while, they both slowly withdrew the white light into their palms. They slowly lowered their arms and stood there in silence. Following that, an extremely vexed expression appeared on their faces. Yu Qianqiu withdrew the purple flame. The muscles on his face squirmed. He looked around and said, "Who can explain to me what this means?" He patted Schwellinglong, who was already frozen into an ice statue. "Sigh." The Snow Empress let out a long sigh and said with endless melancholy, "We were too careless. We thought that the little bastard had already accepted its fate and had no way to escape. Who would have thought that I would be paralyzed by its trembling appearance, allowing it to escape through the gap between our ice spirit harmony with its tiny body?" A very melodramatic reason, but Yu Qianqiu knew that he wasn't lying to him. The husband and wife wouldn't joke around with their daughter's life. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth curled up into a cold smile. He gradually laughed out loud. He stood up and looked down at the family of three. He sneered and said, "A sin caused by heaven can be forgiven, but a sin caused by oneself cannot be escaped. This saying is completely right. I saw a huge joke, but this joke isn't funny at all. There's still a chance. The Snow Empress suddenly seemed to have woken up from a dream. She pounced over and hugged onto Yu Qianqiu's legs. She squeezed out an extremely forced smile on her terrified face. She raised her head and looked at Yu Qianqiu, almost begging. Mister, let's try one more time. Lure it out again. This time, we definitely won't let it escape again. You've seen its spirituality with your own eyes. Do you think you can use the same method to lure it out again? Yu Qianqiu stood coldly on the ice couch. He lowered his head slightly and looked at the forced smile that was hugging onto his legs. He heartlessly shattered her dream and said, if it was so easy to lure it out, then it wouldn't be the Samadhi true fire. It would be a stupid fire that can't even be compared to firewood for cooking. No, the Snow Empress couldn't accept this fact. She hugged onto Yu Qianqiu's legs tightly and begged with a trembling voice, there's still a chance. There's still a way. I know that, mister. You definitely have a way. Can you try one more time? I promise that this time, I definitely won't let it escape again. I beg you to try one more time. Sigh. The Snow Emperor let out another long sigh. He stood up and forcefully carried his wife away. He dragged her under the ice couch and said dejectedly, Mister is right. It won't be tricked a second time. Think of another way. No. The Snow Empress let out a heart-wrenching scream. Tears flowed down her face. She stretched out an arm and scratched at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on the ice couch with his hands clasped behind his back. It seemed like she wanted to grab Yu Qianqiu and try again. Yu Qianqiu stood quietly with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked at her coldly without the slightest emotion. He didn't move at all, and didn't show any sympathy. The Snow Emperor shook his head weakly while hugging her. He emptied one of his hands towards his daughter, who was frozen stiff on the ice couch. He opened his fingers slightly, and immediately sucked in a gust of cold air from his daughter's body. Xue Linglong thawed on the spot and fell back softly. Yu Qianqiu, who originally wanted to be indifferent, bent over to help her up. He slowly let her lie on the ice couch, and then he flashed under the ice couch. Unexpectedly at this moment, Xue Linglong let out a moan. Her eyelids moved as if she wanted to open her eyes. The three of them looked over. They didn't expect her to wake up so quickly, but after thinking about it they understood. Normally, the true Samadhi fire would act up twice in 2 days, and Xue Linglong would only wake up after being suppressed for 2 more times. However, a large amount of the true Samadhi fire's energy was extracted by Yu Qianqiu this time, and it was almost eradicated. Its vitality was greatly damaged, and it probably wouldn't have the ability to stir up trouble in a short period of time. Linglong. The Snow Empress finally let out a surprised cry in the midst of her sorrow. The Snow Empress immediately squeezed out a smile and said, Take care of Linglong first. I'll go discuss with Mister if there's any way to completely get rid of the true Samadhi fire in Linglong's body. The Snow Empress obediently agreed, then broke free from her husband's embrace. She bowed to Yu Qianqiu and said, Please, mister. Then, she hurriedly climbed onto the couch. Her daughter was still the most important. The Snow Empress smiled bitterly and shook her head. She extended her hand and gestured to Yu Qianqiu outside the door, and the two of them slowly walked out. Both of them didn't say a word all the way from upstairs to downstairs. Unknowingly, the two of them walked to the main entrance of the ice palace. On the ice cliff, there were various colored ice sculptures that formed a neon glow, and it was exceptionally eye-catching in the pitch-black netherworld. No one knew when it started snowing again. The wind was light, but the heavy snowflakes fluttered in the air. The footprints left on the ice cliff had already been covered by the snow. This place was supposed to be cleaned from time to time. For the Snow Empress and her family, clearing the snow was a piece of cake, but they were delayed by some matters. The Snow Emperor wasn't in the mood to clear the accumulated snow on the ice cliff. The two of them walked on the snow side by side in the neon lights that reflected each other. Every step they took left a deep footprint in the snow, emitting a dull crunching sound, just like the mood of the two of them. Under the guidance of the Snow Empress, the two of them slowly walked into a colorful pavilion. They wanted to avoid the falling snow, but the snow was carried in by the wind from time to time, and there was already snow in the pavilion. The Snow Empress casually set up a soundproof enchantment. She looked at the white light between the undulating mountains under the night sky and sighed. Sorry to trouble you. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, silently stared at an icicle that supported the pavilion. There were quite a few ice souls inside. He did not reply, because he had lost a chance to understand the Samadhi true flame. He was somewhat unhappy. Do you have any other way to get rid of the true Samadhi fire in Linglong's body? The Snow Empress retracted her gaze and tilted her head to look at Yu Qianqiu. She was carefully observing his expression. I have the 3 mystical flames that can fuse with the true Samadhi fire. You've seen it. Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief. Thinking that he didn't lose anything, he cheered up a little and smiled. When I fuse the 3 mystical flames into the true Samadhi fire, I'm sure I can easily get rid of the problem in Princess Linglong's body. The Snow Empress shook her head and smiled bitterly. From what I know, to fuse with the true Samadhi fire, you need to be at least an immortal emperor, but now, he didn't have the confidence to continue. It's a little too long. Didn't the Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi say that there's a fire spirit among the 5 spirits of heaven and earth that can save Princess Linglong? Yu Qianqiu looked at her and smiled. Maybe I'm lucky enough to find that fire spirit. Find the fire spirit? The Snow Empress was startled and shook her head slightly. Easier said than done. Wanting to meet the 5 spirits of heaven and earth is like looking for a needle in a haystack. You can only follow your fate, you can't force it. How come I've never heard of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth? Yu Qianqiu looked at her and frowned. Can you tell me what's going on? Chapter 1028. Some things just happened when the conditions were right. They couldn't be forced. Yu Qianqiu had racked his brains, just to make sure that the conditions were right. Now that the conditions were right, the Snow Emperor didn't hide it like before, and only paused for a moment. The 5 spirits of heaven and earth have always existed in the legends. It is said that they are 5 spiritual beings born from heaven and earth, each with extraordinary talents and abilities. The Snow Emperor looked at the night sky and said slowly, Originally, I only heard of the existence of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth by chance, but I didn't know which 5 spirits they were. Later, because of Linglong's matter, I asked the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, and Bai Qi to confirm the existence of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth. They are the water spirit, the fire spirit, the metal spirit, the wood spirit, and the earth spirit. Yu Qianqiu was surprised to hear this. Why did it coincide with the 5 elemental arts that he had comprehended? He scratched his face and asked suspiciously, What form do the 5 spirits of heaven and earth exist in? Are they very powerful? I can't be sure what their forms are. They are spiritual beings born from the 5 elements of water, fire, metal, wood, and earth. Some of them are still spiritual beings and haven't formed a fixed form. But once they have a foundation, they should all transform into human forms to cultivate. As for how powerful they are, it depends on how deep their cultivation is. The Snow Emperor said while thinking. It seemed that he didn't know much, so he suddenly asked, Do you think the immortal Emperor Jin Tai of your immortal world is powerful? Immortal Emperor Jin Tai? Of course he's powerful. Otherwise, how could he rule the immortal world? Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He stared at the Snow Empress dumbfounded. After a while he stuttered. You mean he's... The Snow Emperor looked at him and nodded with a smile, undoubtedly telling him that he had guessed correctly. Yu Qianqiu swallowed and calmed his emotions. Jin Tai, his surname is Jin. Is he the metal spirit of the 5 spirits of heaven? That's right. It's good that you know this, but don't tell anyone else. Otherwise, if Jin Tai finds out, he might harm you. I suspect that even Bai Qi, the Emperor of the Underworld, doesn't know about Jin Tai's background, the Snow Emperor said. Hearing this news, Yu Qianqiu rubbed his palms excitedly. It was not because he had learned this big secret, but because he was sure that he had 1 or 2 friends in the middle stage of the Underworld Emperor realm. This was something that couldn't be bought with money. The risk he had taken previously had finally paid off. But then he was stunned. He intertwined his fingers together, as if he had thought of something. He asked suspiciously, since even the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi couldn't see through Jean Tai's background, how did you know? Hehe. I knew you would ask this question. Since you are honest with me, I won't hide it from you. The Snow Emperor laughed. After the Snow Emperor laughed, endless emotions surged on her face. She waved her arm and pointed to the vast land under the curtain of night, and said with great emotion, back then, my wife and I were chased by our enemies, and were forced to enter this snow region, which was extremely dangerous at that time. Just when my wife and I were seriously injured and on the verge of death, who knew that by chance, the two of us in an ice abyss unexpectedly swallowed a pair of ice spirits that were born from the snow region of the vast ice plains. Ice spirits? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Aren't the 5 spirits of heaven and earth water, fire, metal, wood and earth? How come there is an ice spirit? Yes, it is an ice spirit. The Snow Emperor nodded with a smile. It is a great fortune to encounter an ice spirit, but my wife and I encountered a pair of ice spirits, a male and a female. Because of this, we both escaped from death. If this is not God's will, then what is? It is also because of this fortuitous encounter that my wife and I have the achievements we have today. Really good luck. Why can't I encounter it? Yu Qianqiu smacked his lips and said with a face full of envy. He wasn't pretending, but he was really envious. This was called possessing a mountain of treasures without realizing it. Didn't he think about how he had only cultivated from a mortal to an immortal in a mere few decades? Although the Snow Empress and her husband had obtained the ice spirit, they had spent tens of thousands of years to reach their current cultivation. He didn't know it was a blessing in disguise. However, envious was envious. He asked in confusion. But what does this have to do with Jean Tai being a metal spirit? Spiritual qi, that kind of unique spiritual qi born in the world, and is different from any spiritual qi in the 3 realms. The Snow Emperor revealed an expression of reminiscence and said, that was by chance, and was also the first time I met Jean Tai. From his body, I sensed a spiritual qi similar to the ice spirits, and immediately determined that he was some kind of spirit. Thinking of his surname and some observation, I confirmed that he was the metal spirit of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth. There should be no mistake. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu nodded in understanding, but the doubt on his face didn't diminish. He asked doubtfully, didn't you say that there are only 5 spirits of heaven and earth? Why did the ice spirits come out? According to the legends, there are indeed only 5 spirits. This shouldn't be wrong. According to my understanding after absorbing the ice spirit may only be a branch of the water spirit. Maybe there are other spirits like the wind spirit or the lightning spirit in this world. I reckon that the 5 elements of water, fire, metal, wood and earth are the orthodox ones. Of course, this is only my guess, and I can't be sure what's going on. The Snow Emperor muttered to herself and said her thoughts. There was a short silence in the pavilion, and both of them had their own thoughts. Under the quiet night sky, heavy snow swirled. With their cultivation, they could hear the rustling sound of falling snow in the surrounding snow. A gust of wind blew, and some drifting snowflakes were blown in. Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand to catch a piece of feather-like snow. Watching it gradually melt in his palm, he frowned and said to himself, with my current cultivation, it's impossible to melt the Samadhi true fire. It seems that to remove the Samadhi true fire in Linglong's body, I can only find the fire spirit. But where should I find it? Even if I find it, I might not be able to invite it. The Snow Emperor treated him sincerely, and he now regarded the Snow Emperor as a friend. He began to seriously worry about Linglong's injury. He was like this. He would repay a drop of water with a gushing spring, and on the other hand, he would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. He was very extreme. Hearing this, the Snow Emperor felt very gratified, and she faintly smiled and said, actually, The reason why my husband and I were able to devour the ice spirit by chance is related to the great ice law that we cultivate. And I can see that you are proficient in controlling fire, so it is easier for you to encounter the fire spirit. Maybe you can also devour the fire spirit. That way, you will also have a way to remove the samadhi true fire in Linglong's body. You mean that I can devour the fire spirit if I cultivate the fire art? Then if I cultivate the metal art, wouldn't I be able to devour the immortal Emperor Jin Tai? Before he could finish, Yu Qianqiu's body shook, and he was stunned by his own words. The Snow Emperor slightly nodded and smiled. That's about it. But Jin Tai won't be so easy to devour. The key is that his cultivation is too high. Plus, with Jin Tai's personality, he won't let you devour him obediently. You have to defeat him first. However, there are also benefits to having a high cultivation. If you can devour Jin Tai, then his cultivation will be transferred to you. Then congratulations, you will become a late immortal emperor expert, hee. Saying this, he couldn't help but laugh. He thought that Yu Qianqiu was just using Jin Tai as an example, so he casually said this. How could he know that Yu Qianqiu was proficient in the metal art in addition to the fire art? Devour Jin Tai. Jin Tai's cultivation will be transferred to me? Yu Qianqiu's voice trembled as he asked. His heart was thumping wildly, and he couldn't suppress it no matter how hard he tried. His heart was thumping nonstop in his chest. He couldn't wait to take a dagger and stab it into his chest, so that his heart would stop beating, so that he wouldn't be able to take it if it continued to beat. He was about to have high blood pressure. Of course, this is the truth, but I don't think anyone in the three realms has the ability to devour Jin Tai, hee. The Snow Emperor suddenly couldn't help but laugh. No matter how high Jin Tai's cultivation is, you don't have the fortune to enjoy it. Why are you so excited? The key is that I have the fortune, but I don't have the fate. You can't understand the pain that I, your brother, can see but can't touch. Why do you have to say these damned words to me? I'll lose sleep. Yu Qianqiu walked out of the pavilion speechlessly. He raised his hands high and raised his head, allowing the icy snow to fall on his face to cool it down. It was as if he was asking the heavens for help. In his heart, he was begging heaven and earth, hoping that Bai Changchun was still alive. Because if he wanted to devour Jin Tai's cultivation that could make people drool, he could only pin his hopes on Bai Changchun. Among the people he knew, perhaps only Bai Changchun, that super abnormal person could defeat Jin Tai. Then as a disciple, he could bask in his master's glory, help his master clean up the battlefield, and eat Jin Tai at the same time. This was a matter of course. The Snow Emperor naturally saw that something was wrong with this guy, and asked with a frown, "What's wrong?" Yu Qianqiu put down his hands, turned around, and walked back into the pavilion, and said solemnly to the Snow Emperor, I went outside and thought about it calmly. Now I want to tell you that if I can fuse with the samadhi true fire, or devour the fire spirit, as long as there is a way, I will come back as soon as possible to remove the samadhi true fire from Linglong's body. He felt that the information revealed by the Snow Emperor was worth the price. However, the Snow Emperor was stunned. Looking at his sincere expression and sincere eyes, she was a little choked and speechless. She began to figure out why he was so anxious about Linglong's injury. Could it be? She gritted her teeth and said tentatively, It seems that you are very concerned about Linglong. Yu Qianqiu didn't think too much about it, and the flattery came out of his mouth. He patted his chest and said passionately, Of course. From today onwards, your daughter is my niece. I will definitely find a way to relieve her pain. Chapter 1029. Niece. The Snow Emperor was stunned. He thought that Yu Qianqiu had taken a fancy to his daughter, but he didn't expect that he only saw her as his niece. Instantly, he heaved a sigh of relief. To men, some men could be brothers, or be sworn brothers who would lay down their lives for each other. That was a man's admiration for another man. No matter how many flaws they had, they couldn't hide their manly nature. But if he was asked to be his daughter's man, to be his son-in-law, no matter if he said it out loud, agreed, or stopped it, he wouldn't be too willing. Because only men would think that they understood the bad habits of men. Just like how women could always see the many flaws of other women. Why? Don't you want to see me as a friend or brother? Yu Qianqiu pretended to be angry and said, looks like I'm climbing up the social ladder. Don't, that's not what I mean. The Snow Emperor hurriedly waved his hand and responded, you and I should be brothers. I can't ask for more. Everyone had their own selfish motives, and everyone knew how to put on an act. For hands clasped together, you called him Big Brother Shui, and he called him Brother Yu. After all the greetings, they were just short of kowtowing and becoming sworn brothers. Perhaps even the heavens couldn't stand it anymore. It was so disgusting that the snow didn't dare to fall anymore. The snow outside had stopped, but the cold wind still blew in from time to time. The snow has stopped. Yu Qianqiu took the opportunity to pull his hand away from the Snow Emperor's hand. He held onto the ice pillar and glanced outside. The snow had stopped. Looking at the neon lights shining in the ice sculptures outside, he couldn't help but exclaim, Brother Snow, your ice soul is really amazing. I remember Linglong showed her skill, and it really opened my eyes. The Snow Emperor waved his hand, and the snow on the ice table in the center of the pavilion was blown away. There were more than 10 ice souls in the ice layer on the table, and they were very beautiful. He touched the table and smiled, and said, these things are a little amazing in front of outsiders. They are the ice soul mystic soldiers of the Great Snow Mountain. The peace of the millions of miles of snow region is maintained by them. Ice soul mystic soldier, not a bad name. Yu Qianqiu sat on the stool and leaned on the table to carefully observe the ice souls in the layer of ice. Other than the beautiful color, he couldn't find any clues. He looked around and clicked his tongue. It looks like you have close to 10,000 ice soul profound soldiers under you. Nearly 10,000? The Snow Emperor was startled and looked at Yu Qianqiu, guessing that he wasn't pretending and really didn't know. He immediately laughed and said, brother, you underestimate my strength too much. Although my cultivation isn't very high in the netherworld, do you know why I can occupy the Great Snow Mountain for millions of miles in the netherworld as my territory? Do you know why Fire Virtue Immortal Lord wanted to use my Ice Soul Profound Ice to fight against Immortal Emperor Jin Tai? Do you know why I can invite the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi here at any time? I don't know. Yu Qianqiu shook his head weakly. Although he didn't know, he could feel the arrogance of a bastard from the Snow Emperor. One look and he knew that the Snow Emperor was full of confidence. The close to 10,000 Ice Soul Profound soldiers here are just for fun. The Snow Emperor pointed around, and then pointed majestically at the vast snowfield, and said proudly, I, the Snow Emperor, can be counted as one of the few overlords in the netherworld. I have 800,000 Ice Soul Profound soldiers at my command. Even Madame He Qi, the beloved concubine of Bai Qi, and her dark army under her command wouldn't dare to trespass here. Otherwise, I'll let her have a taste of my 800,000 Ice Soul Profound soldiers. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was shocked. 800,000 Ice Soul Profound soldiers. Good heavens! You're not bluffing, right? He couldn't help but stand up and walk to the Snow Emperor's side. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the place where the Snow Emperor pointed, but he didn't see anyone. However, he thought that the Snow Emperor wouldn't boast in front of him, and was just giving advice. Thinking of the scene where Shui Linglong casually threw out the Ice Soul Profound soldiers, he sized up the Snow Emperor and said, could it be that you have hundreds of thousands of subordinates with you at any time? There's no need for that. My wife and I don't fight with the world. If people don't offend us, we won't offend them. We maintain our powerful strength, just to ensure that we can live a peaceful life. There's no need to carry them with us all the time. The Snow Emperor pointed around and said, most of them are scattered and hidden under the boundless ice and snow, guarding this vast snowfield. There's also an advantage to this. By absorbing the energy from the ice and snow, their cultivation will increase steadily. However, the speed of improvement will be very slow compared to our cultivation speed. Their advantage is that they can slowly improve day and night without stopping. They can improve their cultivation by themselves? Yu Qianqiu was shocked again, and immediately asked, I really can't help it. How did you get these Ice Soul Profound soldiers? In fact, most of the higher-ups in the Netherworld knew some of the reasons. Although they didn't know much, it wasn't a secret. Therefore, the Snow Emperor didn't hide anything from him, and told him directly. Most of the Ice Soul Mystic soldiers come from the original ghosts and demons, or some meditation cultivators in the snow region. After my wife and I devoured and merged the ice spirits, we comprehended a great technique by chance. We called it the Xianming Soul Refining Technique. We captured them and erased their spiritual sense, then refined them into ice spirits and planted our spiritual sense imprints to control them. After my wife and I swept through the entire snowy region, we obtained hundreds of thousands of Ice Soul Profound soldiers. After that, anyone who trespassed into this place would be captured and refined into Ice Soul Profound soldiers. After so many years, we naturally accumulated these 800,000 people. Yu Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air. This couple was truly ruthless. So many Ice Soul mystic weapons were actually refined with 800,000 lives. He couldn't help but bitterly smile. You two are really willing to spend time. You must have spent a lot of time capturing these 800,000 meditation cultivators. The Snow Emperor glanced at him disapprovingly and said, "You're thinking the wrong way. It won't take too much of our time. Apart from the thousands of Ice Soul Profound soldiers, who caught them at the beginning, the rest will be caught by these thousands of Ice Soul Profound soldiers. When there are enough people, we just need to find some time to refine them. You should know that these Icy Soul Profound soldiers can't be killed unless they encounter an absolute nemesis like you. So, they will only snowball in number. My wife and I only need to refine them every once in a while, and we don't need to worry about anything at all. Of course, if we meet an expert that they can't deal with, we will personally take action." Yu Qianqiu immediately thought of the scene when Greycloud Xian and Ding Xiang fought against the Ice Soul Profound soldiers. Indeed, no matter how high their cultivation was, they couldn't kill those Ice Soul Profound soldiers. They were clearly dead, but they could inexplicably come back to life. It was really shocking. From this, he thought of the Snow Emperor and his wife refining the Ice Soul Profound soldiers. It was really as easy as rolling a snowball. TSK. If this goes on, won't your great snow mountain become the #1 force in the Netherworld sooner or later? No, become the #1 force in the 3 realms. Yu Qianqiu sighed. He could imagine the scene of the Ice Soul Profound soldiers spreading quickly in the 3 realms like a deadly virus. He was excited that he had such a strong backer, but he was also secretly shocked by this terrifying scene. He was already thinking if he should find a chance to get rid of this family of scourges. Otherwise, they would threaten him sooner or later. However, the Snow Emperor's next words dispelled his worries. The Snow Emperor smiled lightly and said, "Brother, your thinking is a little too naive. Let's not talk about whether we have that kind of ambition or not. First of all, once the Ice Soul Profound soldiers leave the snow region, their power will be greatly reduced. Without snow, they can't be resurrected into various kinds of snow monsters that can attack. Unless we follow the Ice Soul Profound soldiers wherever they go, and cast a spell to make the snow fall first. But this is no different from putting out a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. You have to know that there are many powerful forces in the Netherworld. Once they unite, even Bai Qi has to give way. How can a mere Ice Soul Profound soldier stop them? Moreover, now that the Great Snow Mountain is famous, ordinary people don't dare to trespass. So the number of Ice Soul Profound soldiers has almost not increased. Also, you have to know that our cultivation is not the top in the Netherworld. There are many experts who can kill us. Once we go too far, naturally, someone will come out to deal with us. As long as we are killed, do you think those Ice Soul Profound soldiers that are driven by our spiritual sense imprints will still be useful? Therefore, the rules that should be obeyed must be obeyed. Since the ancient times, no one has ever been able to unify the entire underworld. Even the powerful emperor of the underworld, Bai Qi, could only go with the flow. Unifying the underworld is just a pipe dream. Hee hee. I'm just saying it casually. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. He was relieved, but also a little regretful. Originally, he wanted to find the Snow Emperor, and the Snow Emperor to borrow 100 or 200,000 Ice Soul Profound soldiers to kill everyone. Now it seemed that there was no hope. These Ice Soul Profound soldiers could only do whatever they wanted in the snow region. Just as he was sighing, the Snow Emperor suddenly turned his head to his ear with a strange expression. His voice became magnetic and said, "Brother, do you want to practice the Xianming Soul Refining Technique?" Xianming Soul Refining Technique? Yu Qianqiu was startled. Then he remembered that he had heard of it before. It was the technique to refine Ice Soul Profound soldiers. He said in astonishment, "I haven't swallowed and merged with the Ice Spirit. Why would I practice it?" "Brother, you're wrong." The Snow Emperor smiled gently and said, "Brother is proficient in the art of controlling fire. As long as you find the fire spirit to swallow and merge with, you can still practice the Xianming Soul Refining Technique. If I can refine Ice Soul Profound soldiers, you can refine Fire Soul Profound soldiers." Yu Qianqiu's mouth opened silently. His eyes became brighter and brighter. Suddenly, he hugged the Snow Emperor's arm and said, "Brother Snow, you're really my good brother. No, you're my big brother. You're closer to me than my real big brother. I've finally thought it through under your guidance. It's not a burden to have more skills. Learning one more skill is one more skill. There will be a time when it's useful. Come on." He opened a palm and stretched it out towards the Snow Emperor. His 5 fingers moved nimbly. "Give me the technique of the Xianming Soul Refining Technique. I'll definitely study it diligently, and I'll bring it to greater heights. I won't let you down." Chapter 1030. The Snow Monarch's expression stiffened. She did not expect to see Yu Qianqiu with such a huge contrast. After that, a smile appeared on her face. She pushed Yu Qianqiu's hand away and said, "I can teach you the Xianming Soul Refining Technique, but not now." "Why?" Yu Qianqiu couldn't believe it. He suddenly felt like he was fooled. "Don't misunderstand," Snow Emperor said sincerely. "There's something I have to make clear to you. Before you find and merge the fire spirit, even if I teach you the Xianming Soul Refining Technique, you can't practice it successfully. Why don't we make a gentleman's agreement? As long as you come back after merging the fire spirit, I will teach you the cultivation method of the Xianming Soul Refining Technique without missing a word. How about it?" "Oh," Yu Qian replied with a worried "oh." His hand that was grabbing the man's arm and the hand that was reaching out slowly retracted. He realized that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. He immediately understood Snow Emperor's intention. It was very simple. She wanted him to come back in time to remove the Samadhi true fire from Xuelinglong's body after merging the fire spirit. Snow Emperor saw that Yu Qianqiu understood her intention and could only smile bitterly. Actually, she didn't suspect that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't come back to save Xuelinglong after devouring the fire spirit. The reason why she threw out such a big temptation was that she hoped Yu Qianqiu could put more effort into finding the fire spirit and strive to find it as soon as possible. As for whether Yu Qianqiu could merge the Samadhi true fire, she didn't count on it. She pinned all her hopes on him finding the fire spirit. She explained with some embarrassment, "I just hope that Linglong can suffer less. I don't mean anything else. I hope you can understand my painstaking efforts as a parent." Yu Qianqiu was actually quite disgusted with the Snow Emperor, setting a trap for him to fall into. But since the other party had made their intentions clear, his anger was somewhat appeased. Then he thought about how he had no way to use the Xianming Soul Refining Technique before he swallowed and fused with the fire spirit. In addition, the other party had treated him with sincerity, so he couldn't feel any resentment. He furrowed his brows and suddenly raised his head. "Fine. That's settled then. After I get rid of the Samadhi true fire in Linglong's body, I'll ask you for the Xianming Soul Refining Technique's incantation. Let's clap hands and swear." A palm rose into the air, and the Snow Emperor's spirits rose. She clapped her palm together and said excitedly, It's a deal. Yu Qianqiu's body swayed from the other party's overly excited slap. He couldn't help but grumble. Why are you using so much force? He retracted his hand with a face full of resentment. The Snow Emperor immediately stretched out his hand to grab his shoulder and shook it. He laughed heartily and said, "Brother, please bear with me." It was as if he had forgotten all enmity with a smile. "Your wife feels good. Go and hug your wife, don't hug me. It's disgusting." Yu Qianqiu's shoulder shook, and he twisted his body to avoid the Snow Emperor. The Snow Emperor, who had always prided herself on being pure and elegant, raised one hand. Her expression was twitching. However, Yu Qianqiu acted as if nothing had happened. He pointed at the various ice souls in the pillar that supported the pavilion and asked, "It seems that the reason why the colors of these ice souls are different is related to their cultivation. How do you differentiate them?" The Snow Emperor lowered her hand and smiled bitterly. The ice souls formed by cultivators who have cultivated to the level of Netherworld Knight are orange-yellow. Those who have cultivated to the level of Netherworld Sage are azure. Those who have cultivated to the level of Netherworld Venerable are red. Those who have cultivated to the level of Netherworld Emperor are black. It's very easy to differentiate them. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He stared at the various ice souls in the pillar and admired them for a while. Then, he clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the snow mountain in the distance. He seemed to have something on his mind. A gust of cold wind blew over and fluttered the hem of his robe. He asked indifferently, "From the look of that woman, Lili, she seems to be very determined. Do you think that the people of the Li Palace will be waiting for us in the Underworld River? Are you preparing to leave? Don't you want to stay in my ice palace for a few more days?" The Snow Emperor lightly moved a step and sat on an ice stool. She looked at his back in the neon light and asked, "No need. I have no way of dispelling the true Samadhi fire in Linglong's body. I can't stand your wife's crazy appearance from time to time." Yu Qianqiu didn't move. He narrowed his eyes and stared into the distance. He said, "Besides, I have my own matters to attend to. I can't stand to miss Lady Jin's wedding." "Then I won't keep you any longer." The Snow Emperor sat there with one hand on the table. She lightly patted it with her palm and said, "But I must advise you, in order to avoid conflict with the water race of the Underworld River, don't go by water. Go by land. I see that the information in your ice palace is somewhat blocked. This might have something to do with the fact that your subordinates are all Ice Soul Profound soldiers and can't help you scout for information. You might not know, but Sungyin Xian has already mastered the unrequited love palaces, 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style. With Sungyin Xian here, the people of the Li Palace can't do anything to me. Before the Dragon Transformation Gate, I already made them hesitate for fear of harming the innocent," Yu Qianqiu indifferently said. Sungyin Xian has mastered the 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style? The Snow Emperor was slightly solemn. Back then, Wang Qing had used this move to kill the Fire Virtue Immortal Lord. He had seen it with his own eyes, so he naturally knew the power of this move. After a moment of silence, he shook his head and said, "This matter has nothing to do with how powerful Sungyin Xian is. Even if Sungyin Xian can kill everyone in the Li Palace, the more he kills, the more trouble he will have. You might not know, but the water race of the Underworld River and the cultivators of the land of the Underworld have always abided by an ancient agreement. Mutual non-aggression. Even after Bai Qi took control of the Underworld, he also obediently abided by this ancient agreement. Do I have to fight and not fight back?" Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned his head and said. The Snow Emperor pondered for a moment and said, "No one saw you kill the Crown Prince Li Zhong. If they find you, you can continue to deny it. That ancient agreement is not only effective against the cultivators of the land, it is also effective against the water race of the Underworld River. They don't have any evidence, so they won't dare to do anything to you." Yu Qianqiu was silent for a long time. After a long time, he slowly asked, "I see that you all seem to be very secretive about the water race of the Underworld River. I heard that the water race of the Underworld River has a terrifying existence that is even more powerful than the emperor of the underworld. Is this true? If it's convenient, why don't you tell me so I can broaden my horizons? There should be, but it's a pity that I haven't seen it in so many years in the underworld. The Snow Emperor's palm that was lightly slapping the table suddenly stopped moving. With a solemn expression he recalled, "Many years ago, I once heard someone say that there is a mysterious cave in the depths of the underworld river. It is a forbidden area for the water race of the underworld river, called the Netherworld Divine Palace. It is said that there is a demigod expert that is almost like a god inside, silently protecting the water race of the underworld river." As for the specifics, the person who told this story was also not clear. He also heard it from others. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was slightly shocked. This underworld was indeed an unfathomable place. There was actually an expert that was almost like a god hidden in it. For a moment, he had no choice but to suppress the rash killing intent in his heart. Chapter 1031. The pitch-black night sky began to sprinkle the fine, salt-like snow again. It was not as spectacular as the feather-like snowflakes from before, but the rustling sound on the ground seemed to be louder, as if there were countless ants crawling on the ground. Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand and waved it outside the pavilion. He smiled and said, "I wanted to enjoy the scenery on both sides of the Styx River, but now it seems that in order to avoid conflict with them, I can only borrow the path from Big Brother's Great Snow Mountain." "That's right. You know that you can't do it, but you still do it. The one who suffers is still you." The Snow Emperor heaved a sigh of relief, stood up, and walked to his side. He smiled and said, "When are you leaving? I will personally send you out of the Great Snow Mountain." "Let's go now. There's no need to send me off. It's too ostentatious to let the Snow Emperor send me off. I want to keep a low profile. Maybe it'll be convenient for me to seek refuge here one day." As Yu Qianqiu spoke, he chuckled with some pride. He crossed his hands behind his back and was about to step out of the pavilion when he suddenly turned his head and said, "I want to ask Big Brother a question. If one day I get into a conflict with the Heartless Palace's Wang Qing, who will you help?" The Snow Emperor was speechless. After hesitating for a while, he said awkwardly, "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. If there's any conflict between the two of you, I won't help you, but I won't help him either. I can only help neither side." Yu Qianqiu smiled and walked out of the pavilion. He stepped on the snow on the ice cliff and strode toward the ice palace. If the Snow Emperor said that he would help him, he would be on his guard. After all, Wang Qing saved the life of the family of 3 years ago. His kindness was more than what he was now. It was obvious that the Snow Emperor was trying to fool him. Now it seemed that the Snow Emperor's character was not too bad. He was naturally relieved. The Snow Emperor thought that Yu Qianqiu would be unhappy. Instead, he saw a knowing smile on his face. He didn't seem to be offended at all. He was startled at first, but then he understood the reason. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly. He thought that this kid was too cunning, but at the same time, it made him feel a little relieved. From this point, it could be seen that at least this kid would not be killed so easily, and the possibility of finding the fire spirit was greater. On the ice cliff, Yu Qianqiu, Songyan Xian, Ding Xiang, and Shen Yual came out. Ding Xiang took out a flying shuttle, and the 4 of them cupped their hands towards the Snow Emperor, saying, "Farewell." The Snow Emperor regained his expressionless face and nodded slightly with his hands clasped behind his back. The 4 of them quickly boarded the flying shuttle, and Ding Xiang quickly drove it into the sky. Ding ling 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 sounds came from below. The few of them looked back and faintly saw the mother and daughter standing beside the Snow Empress. In the blink of an eye, they were far away, and nothing could be seen clearly. In a certain room on the 22nd floor of the Immortal Realm's Heavenly Chamber of Commerce, there was a rare absence of the clattering sounds of mahjong. Several women sat around an empty mahjong table. discussing the matter of Yu Qianqiu's trip to the underworld to help the fourth prince of the Li Palace's water tribe leap through the Dragon Gate. Words of surprise, envy, and worry filled the entire room. In reality, this legendary story had already spread throughout the entire immortal realm, but the women who were passionate about playing mahjong did not know about it. It was Nongzhu who came to tell them the news. However, when Nongzhu discovered that the mahjong tiles on the table were actually carved from her beloved purple bamboo, from the southern sea's purple bamboo forest, she let out a crazy roar. As a result, Wei Chuanxiu came to reprimand her. Nongzhu lost her temper the moment she met him, and could only resentfully confiscate the mahjong tiles that the women were playing with. Coming. Ziyi hurriedly rushed into the room with a wooden box in her arms. She placed it on the table where the women were sitting and opened the lid. The wooden box was opened, and a pile of small pieces of white jade fell out with a rustling sound. Putting away the empty wooden box, Ziyi excitedly patted her chest to show off. I used the jade to make a new set of mahjong tiles to make up for my master's impulsiveness. Everyone can continue. The women took the white jade mahjong tiles and examined them carefully. They discovered that the size and the carvings on them were exactly the same as the ones made by Yu Qianqiu. The cut surface was smooth, and the corners were polished smooth. It could be seen that Ziyi had really put in a lot of effort. An even clearer clattering sound rang out. It might have something to do with the material of the mahjong tiles. The four women continued to surround the mahjong tiles, but they did not seem to be as passionate as before. They all seemed to be absent-minded. Hibiscus took out a white board and worriedly frowned. I heard that the underworld is very dangerous. I wonder if it's safe for him there. Bang! Ziyi took out 2 white boards and touched Hibiscus tiles. She angrily threw out a tile and said, "That big swindler trapped us here. But he went to such an exciting place like the underworld to play. He must be up to no good again." As she spoke, she pointed at the women and said, "That big swindler is too fickle. Maybe when he comes back, he will bring another sister who can make up a table for you. Do you believe me?" The 100-charm beauty, who was watching from outside the mahjong table, shook her head and said, "He was right not to bring us. With our cultivation, we won't be of much help to the underworld. Instead, we will be a burden to him." The women nodded in agreement. Only Ziyi said indignantly, "You guys only know how to protect him. Just you wait. It would be best if he can bring 3 of us back at once. We can make up 2 mahjong tables, and you guys will be happy." The women looked at each other. Yenyu, who was sitting on Ziyi's hand, threw out a tile and jokingly said to Ziyi, "Why don't we wait for him to come back? We will persuade him to take you into his room as well." Ziyi's hand, which was reaching out to grab the tile, froze. Her pretty face instantly turned red. She was no longer the naive Ziyi. She had mingled with these women for a long time. In addition, she had always been curious and didn't feel ashamed to ask questions. She understood the relationship between men and women very well. How could she not know what it meant to take someone into her room? She felt shy, but she still said with a strong voice, "Only you guys like that big swindler. You even want to be taken into his room. I don't care." She clearly had a good tile in her hand, but she casually threw it out. This caused the 100-charm beauty, who was watching from behind, to laugh so hard that she trembled. After being laughed by her, Ziyi, who was staring at the tile, immediately reacted. Her face turned as red as an apple. She sat there embarrassedly and didn't say anything. According to her personality, if it was any other time, she would definitely say that she had made a mistake and snatched the tile back. However, she was afraid of exposing her thoughts in front of everyone, so she could only pretend that nothing had happened. However, the 100-charm beauty was secretly playing tricks and told the other 3 women about it. Immediately, the table burst into laughter. The 100-charm beauty pressed her hands on Ziyi's shoulders and laughed secretly. "If he takes the initiative to take you into his room, will you agree?" "He dares." Ziyi suddenly stood up and glared at them. She was a little angry, but she couldn't say no. She could only fiercely say, "If he dares to take me in, I dare to agree. See how I deal with him in the future." I won't protect him like you guys, humph. Then, she pushed the tiles on the table and shouted, I'm not playing anymore. I'm not playing anymore. My good mood has been ruined by you guys. She turned around and quickly ran out with a red face. Her previous enthusiasm for playing mahjong was completely gone. She could only hear a disgusting laughter coming from behind her. In the back garden of the External Affairs Grand Commander's residence of the Immortal Realm of Bliss. Although Mu Tianjiao was already married and no longer participated in the affairs of the Immortal Realm, she still kept an eye on all the news in the Immortal Realm. After marrying Wu Xiong, due to Wu Xiong's authority, she was able to obtain more information than before. She didn't become isolated from the outside world just because she stayed indoors. In the pavilion in the back garden, Wu Xiong's subordinate left after delivering a jade archive. Mu Tianjiao carefully read through the information in the jade archive, then put it away in her storage bracelet. Every day at this time, a jade archive would be delivered punctually. As long as it wasn't something taboo, the daily news of the three realms would be detailed in the jade archive. Naturally, there was no need to worry about the source of the news from the Immortal Palace. Mu Tianjiao would store the jade archive after she finished reading it. It wasn't because she had any desire to win, but because she believed that since she was already married, she should try her best to maintain a common topic with her man and maintain their relationship. Therefore, it was necessary for her to pay attention to the happenings in the three realms every day. After reading the information in the jade archive, Mu Tianjiao sat there in silence for a long time. Not long after, steady and familiar footsteps could be heard from outside the garden. She quickly stood up, walked out of the pavilion, and walked along the small path to welcome them. In reality, as long as Wu Xiong was still within the Immortal Realm of Bliss, he would return to his residence around this time every day. As expected, Wu Xiong saw that familiar smile as soon as he stepped through the garden gates. The two of them exchanged greetings, then walked into the pavilion, hand in hand, and sat down. This had become a habit for the two of them. Every time this happened, they would sit down and chat for a while. Similarly, every time this happened, Mu Tianjiao would start the conversation with words that warmed Wu Xiong's heart. However, today Mu Tianjiao seemed a little absent-minded. Wu Xiong's gaze flickered as he studied her face. He smiled faintly and asked, Is there something on your mind, madam? Mu Tianjiao raised her head and looked at him for a while. She bit her lip and said, I heard that my father has gone to the underworld. I wonder if the great commander knows about this. Wu Xiong wanted to deny it and say that he didn't know. However, after a pause, he smiled bitterly and said, So that's what it is. Actually, my father-in-law has spoken to me about this before. I didn't approve of him going, but he insisted on going. Given his status and the fact that he's not an outsider, I couldn't stop him by force. Before he left, my father-in-law specifically told me not to tell you about this. I've been hesitating on whether or not I should tell you. Since you already know, it saves me a lot of trouble. I know my father's temperament better than anyone else. I can imagine that he's determined to go. Mu Tianjiao's face was full of worry as she said, But I'm really worried about his safety. Wu Xiong laughed heartily and said, My father-in-law only said that he wanted to go to the underworld to see if he could expand the Four Links Chamber of Commerce's business channels. I don't think there will be any danger. Besides, before he left, I told him that if he encountered any trouble, he could report my name to the Army of the Dark Underworld. I have some connections with the higher-ups of the Army of the Dark Underworld. It shouldn't be a problem for me to resolve some problems. So, you don't have to worry too much. There shouldn't be any danger. Chapter 1032. As for the fact that Mu Bing had gone to deal with Yu Qianqiu, he wouldn't tell Mu Tianjiao. Unexpectedly, Mu Tianjiao said worriedly, I saw the news earlier that Yu Qianqiu happened to help the Styx River tribe transform into a dragon. I'm worried that father is targeting Yu Qianqiu. If that's the case, it'll be troublesome. Wu Xiong's eyebrows twitched unconsciously. He couldn't help but say something he didn't want to say. It seems that Madam is very concerned about that Yu Qianqiu. Mu Tianjiao was startled. She was a smart person, and knew that some of her words had aroused Wu Xiong's disgust. This kind of disgust was a common problem for men, but it was fatal and very hurtful. She immediately shook her head and said, "It can't be said to be concerned. It's just that when the Four Links Chamber of Commerce was in danger, Yu Qianqiu once helped us. He can be considered as a former friend of mine. Father's actions on the day of the wedding have always made me feel very guilty." Although she was smart and wanted to draw a line between her and Yu Qianqiu that couldn't be crossed, she didn't know that in order to vent his anger, her father had once fabricated a story that didn't exist and sold her out. As a result, her words sounded exceptionally harsh to Wu Xiong's ears. He could hear that she was trying to cover something up. Any man would find it hard to accept that his own woman was thinking about another man behind his back. Wu Xiong's face darkened as he said, "But why did I hear that Yu Qianqiu once pursued you? Commander, where did this come from? Who's deliberately slandering me?" Mu Tianjiao asked in astonishment. An almost imperceptible trace of panic flashed across her face. It wasn't true that Yu Qianqiu had pursued her, but it was true that she had pursued Yu Qianqiu. As a wife, she was naturally afraid that such a thing would be known by her husband. However, thinking that only she and Yu Qianqiu knew about it, based on her understanding of Yu Qianqiu, he would not say such a thing. It would not be good for him, so she immediately calmed down. However, Wu Xiong was silently paying attention to the other party's reaction after hearing these words. When he saw that this woman, who had always been calm in the face of trouble, was actually a little flustered, his heart immediately turned cold. However, when he remembered that her body had never betrayed him, his face instantly changed into a smile. He got up and walked over to hold her hand. Suddenly, he hugged her by the waist and said with a smile, "How could your husband not know that someone is deliberately slandering and driving a wedge between us? I have already executed that scoundrel. Madam, you don't have to take it to heart." With that said, he carried her directly to the courtyard where the two of them lived. Mu Tianjiao's words were perfunctory, but she also saw a trace of haze flash in Wu Xiong's eyes, and her body couldn't help but stiffen. In the bedroom, it was common for a couple to make love, but Wu Xiong tore off her clothes very rudely. There was no foreplay at all. Mu Tianjiao gritted her teeth and endured it. After that, Wu Xiong suddenly remembered that he had something to deal with, so he said goodbye, put on his clothes, and left straight away. She didn't know whether it was true or not. Mu Tianjiao, who was naked and lying on the bed, bit her lips and said nothing. Her white body was red and swollen. She could feel that he was venting almost crazily, as if he did not treat her as a human at all. His usual gentle and passionate caresses turned into fierce and heavy pinching, and the swelling on her chest and some parts of her body did not disappear for a long time. Her powerless gaze suddenly fell on her dressing table opposite her. The forever and earth-conjoined sculpture that Yu Qianqiu had given her previously was still there, and it had disappeared. Mu Tianjiao's eyes immediately flowed with tears, and she murmured, "In the end, you still took it seriously and cared about it. If you marry a chicken, follow the chicken, and if you marry a dog, follow the dog. Why don't you believe me?" When Wu Xiong sent someone to propose marriage, she did not even think about it, and wanted to reject it. This was because she had long understood that if she married a man of heavenly status, even if she, a woman on earth, could leap up a tree and become a golden phoenix, the difference in status would be like heaven and earth, and she would have to live cautiously in the future. Her self-esteem could not stand that. However, for the sake of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, she still agreed. She believed that with her wisdom, she would be able to maintain a good relationship between them. However, the thing she worried about the most had still happened. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. She had originally married the other party because of his power, so naturally, she valued his power. For the sake of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce and her father, she could not resist at all. She did not even have the right to refute. Otherwise, the consequences would not be something she could bear. A flying shuttle rapidly traversed the dusky sky, and there were 7 or 8 people standing on it. This was not the first time Mu Bing had come to the underworld. He had come here to do business before, but it had always been on a small scale. He had never gone as deep as he did today. This was the first time he had heard of Twilight City. As for why he wanted to go to Twilight City, it was because the people around him had determined that Yu Qianqiu, who had broken into the underworld, should have gone to Twilight City. He originally came for Yu Qianqiu, so naturally, he also wanted to go to Twilight City. Moreover, after knowing that Twilight City was a place where some high-level sects in the immortal world did business in the underworld, he felt that with his current status, how could he not know about Twilight City? Of course, he had to go and take a look. Is there still no news from Twilight City? Mu Bing stood in the middle of the flying shuttle with his hands behind his back, and asked the people standing in front of him with a lofty aura. In order to make things go smoothly for him in the underworld, Wu Xiong had secretly greeted some people in the underworld. When Mu Bing entered the underworld with the 2 early great immortal experts, recruited by the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce, there were already 5 underworld experts waiting for him. The 5 people were from 2 gangs, dressed in what seemed to be some of the underworld's rogue cultivators. Among them, there were 2 people who were serious in speech and manner, with a military momentum, and all of them were early underworld venerable. Among the other 3, 2 of them were late underworld venerable, and 1 of them had reached early underworld emperor. Although this lineup was not very strong in the underworld, it was still strong. However, when the 5 people saw Mu Bing, they all expressed their attitude and said that they would listen to his orders. Mu Bing was not a fool. Naturally, he understood that these people were secretly sent by Wu Xiong to help him. Although he did not point it out, he still accepted it as a matter of course. According to the calculation of the distance, they should have already arrived at Twilight City, but Twilight City said that they have not seen them yet. I guess they might have been delayed by something on the way. One of the 2 people replied, while the other person was driving the flying shuttle. Mu Bing frowned and thought for a moment, then changed into a kind attitude and asked a skinny old man with a goatee next to him, "Mr. Dong, do you think it is possible that they did not go to Twilight City at all, but went to other places?" The reason why he was so polite to the old man with a goatee was because this person had the highest cultivation in the group, early underworld emperor. Although he may not have the power of his son-in-law, but his cultivation was similar to his son-in-law's early immortal emperor, so naturally he was more respectful. The skinny old man stroked his beard and laughed. That is not necessarily true. Since they are going upstream along the Styx River, they must pass through the Great Snow Mountain. Then he waved his hand and pointed to the side. Before Mr. Mu came, we have already sent people to set up surveillance on the land route. As long as they leave the Styx River, they will enter our site. According to the current situation, they may have broken into the Great Snow Mountain and angered the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress. They are already dead. Mu Bing looked in the direction of the old man's finger and found that they were flying over a vast white mountain range. Then he realized that it should be the Great Snow Mountain that the old man was talking about. He couldn't help but murmur to himself, if this is the case, then it is really convenient for him. The skinny old man's eyes flickered slightly. Then he smiled and said, "Although we are ordered to follow Mr. Mu's command this time, we don't know what the matter is. We don't know why the higher-ups ordered us to keep an eye on Yu Qianqiu. Can Mr. Mu tell us?" Mu Bing's face changed slightly. Then he said, "Mr. Dong is too impatient. I will let you know when the time comes." He also knew that Yu Qianqiu was now involved with the immortal emperor. If the details were leaked before the matter was completed, he was afraid that it would cause big trouble if the matter was exposed. "I am only following orders. I don't want to ask about anything. I just feel that it is a little strange." The skinny Mr. Dong stared at Mu Bing and smiled. Although this Yu Qianqiu's cultivation is not that great, his reputation is not small. especially since he carried the decree of the Golden Emperor when he traveled. It is already known to everyone. I can't think of anyone in the immortal world who would dare to have any ideas about him. However, I heard that during Mr. Mu's daughter's wedding, Mr. Mu and this Yu Qianqiu did not seem to be on good terms. I wonder if this matter has anything to do with it? Mu Bing was slightly angry, but he didn't dare to say anything. He only smiled noncommittally. The skinny old man saw that Mu Bing didn't want to say anything, so he didn't mind. He waved his hand and smiled. Mr. Mu doesn't need to take it seriously. I was just making a wild guess. Then he looked to the side with a smile, and after a while, he suddenly made a sound of surprise. He waved his hand in the direction of the Great Snow Mountain and said, "Slow down and fly. Wait and see who it is." The few people followed his gaze and saw a faint stream of light flying over from the depths of the Great Snow Mountain. The flying shuttle they were on immediately slowed down. Not long after, Mr. Dong, who had the highest cultivation, was the first to determine what it was. He frowned and said, "It's actually another flying shuttle. Normal people don't dare to enter the Great Snow Mountain, and those who can travel with the Snow Empress have high cultivation. They also don't need a flying shuttle, so who could it be?" Under their intentional slowing down, the two flying shuttles quickly approached. In fact, the people who passed through the Great Snow Mountain were none other than Yu Qianqiu and his group. They also wanted to see who was on the flying shuttle that was flying slowly in front of them. Song Yin Xan, who had the highest cultivation, swept a glance at the few people on the flying shuttle and immediately found a familiar person. He was stunned and said, "Mu Bing, why is he here?" Mu Bing, Yu Qianqiu, who was watching with narrowed eyes, was also stunned. With his cultivation, he couldn't clearly see who was standing on the flying shuttle. He couldn't help but turn his head and ask, "You mean Wu Xiong's father-in-law, Mu Bing?" Chapter 1033. There was no need for Tsangyan Xian to answer. The distance between the two flying shuttles had rapidly shortened. He saw Mu Bing in the middle of the group at a glance, and the other party naturally saw him as well. Mu Bing was stunned at first. Obviously, he did not expect to meet Yu Qianqiu under such circumstances. After he reacted, he sneered again and again. It was as if he had worn out iron shoes in fruitless search, only to find what he had found without even looking for it. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He looked at Tsangyan Xian beside him, and then at Mu Bing, who had a sneer on his face. The scene of him being humiliated in Wu Xiong's mansion in Paradise Wonderland replayed in his mind. He really did not expect that the two protagonists would actually be in the netherworld. His slightly cold gaze finally locked onto Mu Bing. Back then, it was reasonable for Tsangyan Xian to humiliate him. After all, the two were enemies. It would be strange if there was no conflict. However, he never expected that Mu Bing would jump out as an ungrateful character and ruthlessly trample on his face in front of everyone. He was at a loss for what to do, and became the laughing stock of the immortal world for a while. From then on, Yu Qianqiu regarded Mu Bing as a dead man, with no room for redemption. "I didn't expect to meet sect leader Mu here." Tsangyan Xian cupped his hands at the other party and glanced at the others. His words and actions had already elevated a small chamber of commerce president to a sect leader. Mu Bing now indeed had this qualification. He had thousands of subordinates, and was no longer the small chamber of commerce that only had a few people and could go bankrupt at any time. "Greetings, Master Tsangyan." Mu Bing's eyes moved away from Yu Qianqiu and smiled at Tsangyan Xian in return. "So you are sect leader Mu of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. Nice to meet you." Ding Xiang smiled and took the initiative to cup his hands. "I am Hidden Dragon Villa's elder Ding Xiang." He had naturally heard of the conflict between Mu Bing and Yu Qianqiu. Although Yu Qianqiu had saved his life before, for him, it was not worth offending Mu Bing, the Immortal Palace External Affairs commander behind Mu Bing. For Yu Qianqiu, "Greetings, Elder Ding." Mu Bing hurriedly returned the greeting. To him, the Hidden Dragon Manor was one of the top sects in the immortal world. Although he had never come into contact with them, it was inevitable that he would have to rely on them in the future to develop his own forces. The skinny old man beside him cupped his fists and said with a smile, "I've long heard of the great name of Heartless Palace's chief priest, Priest Song Yun Exin. A few days ago, I even heard that Priest Song Yun Exin had single-handedly deterred the water race of the Netherworld River from making any reckless moves." He had long wanted to see his true appearance, but he didn't expect that he would be lucky enough to see him today. "Nice to meet you. This old man is Dong Shunlai. Mr. Dong, you flatter me." Song Yun Exin clenched his fist slightly. He could tell that the other party was an expert from the Netherworld. He didn't dare to be too careless. After all, this was the Netherworld, not the immortal world. Dong Shunlai had already observed the people on the flying shuttle. One was Firmament Cloud Exin, one was Ding Xiang, and one was from the Styx River's water tribe. Since Firmament Cloud Exin was present, then the identity of the other person was self-evident. However, he still smiled and cupped his fists politely. "May I know your name, friend?" "Well said." Yu Qianqiu returned the greeting. "This one is Yu Qianqiu." "Oh." Dong Shunlai dragged out the last syllable with a deep meaning. He looked at Mu Bing with a smile as if asking, "Now that we've found the person, what should we do?" The people on the flying shuttle all stared at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu couldn't see through the other party's strength. After replying, he stood there expressionlessly. Just as he was about to secretly ask Firmament Cloud Exin about it, Mu Bing couldn't stand the sight of a little tramp like him mingling with experts. He immediately sneered. "Some people don't know how to weigh themselves. They're clearly a scoundrel who's not worth a fart." Instead of hiding in their nest and struggling at death's door, they came out to court death. They really can't be any more despicable. The atmosphere at the scene froze. Everyone could tell that he was talking about Yu Qianqiu. Firmament Cloud Exin frowned slightly. He had been with Yu Qianqiu for a while, and knew that this guy had a crazy ruthlessness in his bones. If he was forced into a corner, he would do anything. He was worried that Yu Qianqiu would start a fight in a fit of anger. At that time, he would be in the most difficult position. He couldn't not protect Yu Qianqiu, and if he protected Yu Qianqiu, he was afraid that he would offend Wu Xiong, who was behind Mu Bing. He couldn't help but feel a little sullen. He felt that Mu Bing was too arrogant, and didn't care about his face at all. Dong Shunlai glanced at Firmament Cloud Exin, and chuckled twice with a fake smile. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with a mocking expression. He wanted to see how this guy, who had caused so much commotion, would deal with it. "Elder Ding," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, "someone is mocking you. Don't you want to beat him up? Son of a bitch." Ding Xiang was stunned. He didn't think that he would get hit while lying down. What did this have to do with him? How could he implicate others like this? He naturally knew that Mu Bing was talking about Yu Qianqiu and not him. His expression immediately twitched and he smiled bitterly. "That can't be." Unexpectedly, the one who was being scolded didn't react, but the one who was scolding him flew into a rage. "How dare you?" Mu Bing pointed at him and shouted. "Yu Qianqiu, you cowardly bandit, how dare you frame me? You're indeed a famous shameless scoundrel in the immortal world. If you have the ability, don't hide and rely on others to protect you. So what if I'm a scoundrel? You think you're worthy of criticizing me? Why don't you think about what you relied on to be able to have such an ostentatious appearance today?" Yu Qianqiu swallowed the vicious words that were on the tip of his tongue. He originally wanted to say that Ding Xiang only relied on his daughter to sleep with someone else in exchange for glory and splendor. However, he still admired Mu Tianjiao's character and couldn't bear to tarnish such a woman. Secondly, with his current strength, it was really unwise to involve Wu Xiong in scolding him. Blatantly slapping Wu Xiong's face was no different from slapping the Immortal Palace's face. After all, Wu Xiong was the external affairs commander of the Immortal Palace. He stared at him with disdain and sneered. "I don't know who was the one who begged a scoundrel like me for help. If it wasn't for this scoundrel, your 4 Links Chamber of Commerce would have long been razed to the ground by the 8 Pagoda Chamber of Commerce. If it wasn't for this scoundrel who risked his life to help you in the ruins of God, your 4 Links Chamber of Commerce would have long collapsed. Would you still be able to strut around like you do today?" You ungrateful ingrate. I don't even want to scold you. Yet you still shamelessly run out to be scolded. What the hell do you think you are? Who do you think you are? You. Mu Bing pointed at Yu Qianqiu with a flushed face. He was so angry that he was trembling. After holding it in for a long time, he could only say, "You're courting death. With just you. Did you eat shit? Or did your head grow on your butt? What kind of bullshit is this?" Yu Qianqiu sneered and pointed at him with disdain. "Didn't you scold me for being a cowardly bandit? Fine. Then I'll play with you. I don't need anyone's protection. And you don't need anyone's protection either. If you have the guts, then come out and fight me one-on-one. Let's see who's courting death. Do you dare? Do you have the guts?" As soon as these words came out, everyone looked at each other with the people around them. Although Mu Bing had the cultivation of a late-stage exalted immortal, no one dared to guarantee that he was a match for Yu Qianqiu. After all, the sect leader of the 4 islands of Lake Light was also a late-stage exalted immortal, but 2 of them were still killed by Yu Qianqiu. However, these words were too vicious. Mu Bing was almost provoked to jump out by Yu Qianqiu. However, if he really had to face life and death, he didn't have the guts. With a good son-in-law as a backer, there were still good days ahead of him. How could he take this risk? After trembling with anger, he finally endured it and said stubbornly, "For the sake of the immortal emperor's decree, I'll let you go for now." Bullshit. You're just a chicken and a dog in my eyes. Killing you doesn't even need to expend any effort. Do I need you to let me go? I've seen shameless people before, but I've never seen someone as shameless as you. Yu Qianqiu rolled up his sleeves and waved his hand, saying, "If you have the guts, let's sign a life and death contract. No matter who dies, they asked for it. After that, no one will be willing to blame the other. Mu Bing, if you don't dare to accept the challenge today and scold me, I'll return all of it. I'll let everyone see who's the one hiding and relying on others to protect him." These words immediately put Mu Bing in a difficult position. He gritted his teeth, waiting for the people around him to give him a way out of this embarrassing situation. At this moment, everyone could see that Yu Qianqiu was deliberately provoking him. His purpose couldn't be more obvious. Obviously, he was very confident that he could take this opportunity to kill Mu Bing. Songyan Xian was someone who had seen Yu Qianqiu in action, so he knew that Mu Bing was no match for Yu Qianqiu. In fact, the unluckiest person here was him. Regardless of whether Yu Qianqiu or Mu Bing died, it wouldn't benefit him. Needless to say, Yu Qianqiu's life was temporarily linked to his. As for Mu Bing, if he didn't stop him, and he was killed by Yu Qianqiu, who knew if Wu Xiong would blame it on him? Sect Master Mu, I don't care if you want to settle your grudge with Yu Qianqiu, but I hope that you can give this old man face, and push this matter to after the immortal emperor's wedding. After all, this old man is carrying a heavy responsibility, and I can't just sit by and watch. You know this. Songyan Xian had to give Mu Bing a way out of this embarrassing situation. Although Dong Laishan, who had been watching from the sidelines for a long time, came here on orders, the reason why he didn't speak was because he didn't want to be foolishly betrayed. At this point, he already knew why Mu Bing came to the Netherworld. He immediately followed Songyan Xian's words and chuckled. Sect Master Mu, since Exalted Song has spoken to this point, it won't be right if you don't give him face. You have a sharp tongue. You'll be crying later. Mu Bing threw out a ruthless remark, then turned around and shouted, "Let's go." Although he left the stage, his face was still livid. He had lost a lot of face today. Dong Laishan smiled and cupped his hands at Songyan Xian and the others, then quickly left in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianqiu stared at the flying shuttle in front of him and sneered. "Elder Ding, follow them." Chapter 1034. Ding Xiang immediately felt a toothache. This guy still didn't give up. He couldn't help but look at Songyan Xian for help. To be able to cultivate to this level, he didn't want to get involved in the grudge between Yu Qianqiu and Mu Bing. Although Yu Qianqiu saved his life, there were many ways to repay the favor. There was no need to throw his life away again. If he angered Wu Xiong, There was no guarantee that the Hidden Dragon Manor wouldn't abandon him at a critical moment. Yu Qianqiu, if it was any other time, I would be more than happy to see you and Mu Bing fight to the death. Grey Cloud Xan frowned and said in a low voice, but now, everyone is well aware of it, so there's no need for me to say anything more. Don't say that I didn't warn you. Even if you kill Mu Bing, Wu Xiong won't find trouble with you for the time being out of respect for the Immortal Emperor. However, after the Immortal Emperor's wedding, Wu Xiong will have 10,000 ways to make you wish you were dead. Damn, isn't this bullshit? Wu Xiong still has a chance after this? I'm afraid your Tsongyin Xian will be the first to come after me. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot. In reality, he also knew that he couldn't kill Mu Bing in front of everyone. Not to mention that there were a lot of people stopping him. Even if he wanted to kill him, he couldn't do it in front of everyone. If the news was leaked, even if Wu Xiong wanted to save his face, the world commerce would be the first to suffer. After all, the Immortal Emperor's decree was given to him. It could only protect him temporarily, and not the people of the world commerce. Unless he could kill everyone present to silence them, it was a bit unrealistic. In short, if he wanted to kill Mu Bing now, he couldn't leave any evidence. As long as Wu Xiong didn't have any evidence, he would be wary of the Immortal Emperor and wouldn't dare to casually touch the world commerce. Otherwise, with the Immortal Emperor's power and tactics, he would probably turn a blind eye to it. There's no hurry to kill him now. Yu Qianqiu stared at the disappearing flowing light and narrowed his eyes. I just feel that it's a bit strange. This guy has Wu Xiong's support in the immortal world, and has plenty of opportunities to earn money. Why would he suddenly come to the underworld? There's no need to go through so much trouble just to deal with me. Furthermore, he had mingled with the people from the netherworld. Presumably, the cultivation of the people around him was not low. This matter must have something to do with Wu Xiong. Otherwise, Mu Bing wouldn't be able to command the people of the underworld. Maybe there was some secret behind this matter. What if Wu Xiong did something shameful behind the Immortal Emperor's back? My premonitions have always been accurate. Aren't you interested in knowing? Elder Ding, follow me. I promise I won't do anything. He was speaking from the bottom of his heart. He did suspect that Mu Bing was up to something. However, Yu Qianqiu had wronged Mu Bing. Even in his wildest dreams, Yu Qianqiu would never have imagined that Mu Bing had spent so much effort to come after him. What would Yu Qianqiu think if he knew? What if Wu Xiong did something shameful behind the Immortal Emperor's back? Although the reason was a bit far-fetched, Grey Cloud Xian and Ding Xiang couldn't help but feel their hearts palpitate. If they really happened to have something on Wu Xiong, then it would be very useful at a critical moment. When Ding Xiang saw Grey Cloud Xian nod slightly in a non-committal manner, he immediately drove the flying shuttle and chased after him. Sect Master. Before the subordinate could finish speaking, Mu Bing immediately shouted, "Shut up!" His heart was filled with hatred. Joining the Four Links Chamber of Commerce halfway was just joining halfway. If his disciple Nan Tianlong was present just now, he would definitely protect him and not embarrass him like this. That disciple's expression stiffened, but he still braced himself and said, "It seems like they're catching up again." Although his cultivation was a level higher than Mu Bing's, Mu Bing had a good daughter and found a powerful man, so he could only compromise. Oh, Mu Bing suddenly turned around. Judging from the vague outline of the people, they were indeed catching up again. Deng Shang's expression slightly changed. He was actually quite afraid of death. If he had a bit of courage, he wouldn't have made a fuss and had to have his daughter come out to support him. Although he could use his connections to intimidate others, if someone really wanted to use force against him, he would immediately be afraid. The others also turned around to look. Dong Laishun slightly narrowed his eyes and said, "Sect Master Mu, if I'm not wrong, the purpose of your visit this time is to take the life of that Yu Qianqiu." Mu Bing swallowed his saliva. Now he was a little regretful that he came to the netherworld to find Yu Qianqiu. At worst, he could just wait until the Immortal Emperor's wedding. At that time, there would be many ways to deal with him. He tilted his head and smiled awkwardly. Since Mr. Dong has already guessed it, I won't hide it anymore. That's right. They have already caught up. I wonder if Mr. Dong has any way to solve the current crisis? Crisis? Dong Laishun glanced at him with a slightly disdainful expression. He turned back to look at the two meditation cultivators with military aura and laughed. Presumably, with Sect Master Mu's ability, you still can't mobilize the people of the Dark Army to help. It seems like it's for the sake of your son-in-law Wu Xiong. As expected of the External Affairs Commander of the Immortal Palace. I've never heard of him having dealings with our great king. I didn't think that they would be secretly communicating. He then looked at Mu Bing and said, So it seems that Commander Wu is secretly supporting you and taking action against Yu Qianqiu. However, I'm a little curious. Is Commander Wu not afraid of the Immortal Emperor's thunderous rage if the news is leaked? You should know that Yu Qianqiu carries the Immortal Emperor's decree with him. Mu Bing's expression immediately became ugly. He didn't know where this Dong Laishun came from, but he knew that the two meditation cultivators with the pseudonyms of Black Big and Black Two were indeed people of the Dark Army. Before coming here, Wu Xiong had told him that the Dark Army would send these two people to be his contacts. If he really encountered any trouble that he couldn't solve, he could ask these two people to contact the people of the Dark Army for help. Mu Bing's expression was ugly. I don't think Mr. Dong will leak this matter. Of course not. I came here on the Great King's orders. If I messed up, how would I report back? Dong Laishun smiled and shook his head. Sect Master Mu's two subordinates have a higher cultivation than Sect Master Mu. As the Sect Master, do you think you can order them around? Although the two people that Mu Bing brought with him didn't like hearing this, they still had to endure it. Not to mention that the person who said this was an early-stage Netherworld Emperor. He wasn't someone they could afford to offend. Seeing that Dong Laishun was getting further and further away, Mu Bing looked at the flying shuttle that was getting closer and closer, and said with some anxiety, When I was recruiting talents, I recruited them. It's not strange that their cultivation is higher than mine. Mr. Dong, the most important thing right now is how to get rid of those people behind us. This Yu Qianqiu is famous for being a madman, and is capable of doing anything. No. Sect Master Mu is mistaken. The most important thing right now is to not let others know that you are targeting Yu Qianqiu, and that Great Commander Wu Xiong is involved. This is something you are doing behind Great Commander Wu Xiong's back. Dong Laishun smiled and waved his hand. Suddenly his hands grew longer. His palms shot out like ghostly claws, and instantly grabbed the heads of the two subordinates that Mu Bing brought with him. Puff! Their brains splattered on the spot. The two didn't even have time to scream before they lost their lives. Their corpses were thrown out of the flying shuttle by the two withered arms. As a result, Mu Bing was so scared that his face turned pale. He retreated and said in a panic, What do you want to do? Dong Laishun retracted his arms, and his terrifying and sinister arms instantly returned to normal. He looked at Mu Bing and shook his head slightly. He finally understood why the king had sent him to do such a thing. This guy actually brought two people that he couldn't completely control. Sooner or later, Wu Xiong would be killed. At the same time, he also faintly guessed that the king and Wu Xiong might have some secret that couldn't be exposed. Previously, when he guessed Mu Bing's intentions, he thought that the king had sent him to distract Ashy Cloud Messenger, so that Mu Bing could find an opportunity to kill Yu Qianqiu. This made him rather unhappy, because he didn't have the slightest confidence in dealing with the Heartless Palace's 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style. Now it seemed that this wasn't the case at all. The main purpose was to prevent the situation from getting out of control. As for the secret between the king and Wu Xiong, that wasn't something that he should worry about. The king clearly trusted him by sending him to do this. If he went overboard and inquired about the secret that he shouldn't know, he would be courting death. But what made Dong Laishun feel strange was that if there really was a secret, why would Wu Xiong do such a stupid thing? Because the risk of exposing the relationship between the two sides was too great. If it was just to get rid of Yu Qianqiu, the king could have sent an expert to do it alone. There was no need to put Mu Bing in the middle, because even if Jin Tai was unhappy, he wouldn't have the ability to intervene in the underworld. Protect me. Mu Bing hid behind Black 2, who was sent by the army of Onyx. Black 2 said expressionlessly, Mr. Mu, don't panic. Mr. Dong has already discussed it with us before we made our move. He did the right thing. Those two people must be eliminated. Mu Bing looked at these people in horror. He suddenly felt like he had fallen into a wolf's den. Dong Laishun acted as if nothing had happened. Looking at the flying shuttle that was gradually catching up, he smiled and said, Sect leader Mu is actually worrying too much. The Heartless Palace is under the control of others. Ashy Cloud Messenger doesn't have the guts to go against Great Commander Wu Xiong. According to our previous judgment, they were originally going to Twilight City. They were just continuing on their way. They shouldn't be chasing after us. But that Yu Qianqiu is protected by Ashy Cloud Messenger. It is indeed a troublesome matter. If we don't lure Ashy Cloud Messenger away, I'm afraid that we can't kill Yu Qianqiu. That 3-in-1 sword drawing style is really not something that anyone can block. Hearing this, Mu Bing gradually recovered from his fright. Thinking about how Wu Xiong had no reason to harm him, his courage immediately grew and he slowly asked, If that's the case, does Mr. Dong have any way to resolve this? If he didn't have scruples about Ashy Cloud Messenger, he would have already asked everyone to kill Yu Qianqiu. How could he have humiliated himself? Chapter 1035. Dong Laishun looked at the flying shuttle and smiled. With the protection of the ash-gray cloud letter, there's no good way. But we're not far from Twilight City. We'll see when we get there. There is always a way to get him away from Yu Qianqiu. Good. Then let him live for a few more days. Mu Bing gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. His resentment was not gone for a long time. Ding Xiang drove the flying shuttle and followed at a distance of nearly a kilometer. He did not widen the distance, but did not get too close either. The two sides moved forward quickly, one in front and one behind. There was no surprise or danger along the way. After a full 5 days, as the flying shuttle in front slowly slowed down, Ding Xiang also slowed down. He looked back and said to them, We have arrived at Twilight City. Needless to say, they had already seen the distant plains dotted with lights like the stars in the night sky. The area was not small, but for the underworld that was immersed in the night, it seemed a bit different. Among them, except for Yu Qianqiu, everyone had been here before, so Yu Qianqiu looked around curiously. The flying shuttle carrying Mu Bing and the others had already dived into the waning light. The flying shuttle behind them was about to land when Yu Qianqiu shouted, Wait! Ding Xiang understood and stopped the flying shuttle in the air. Most people who came here for the first time would inevitably look at the environment of Twilight City curiously. Below was a huge city wall, crisscrossed rows of houses, and the lights shining through the windows were the little stars in the distance. There were few tall buildings in the city wall. Occasionally, a 3-story attic was already considered high. The seemingly disorderly, but orderly streets were intertwined like a net. The strange thing was that most of the lights were lit in the rooms, and there were few illumination objects on the wide or narrow streets outside. In the center of the city, there was a square that wasn't small. In the middle of the square, there was a circular foundation that was 10 meters tall and nearly 100 meters tall. However, on the foundation, there was a huge snake statue that was also nearly 100 meters tall, towering into the night sky. Unfortunately, this snake-shaped sculpture was a broken stone sculpture. To be more precise, it was a statue with a snake's body and a human head. The lower half of the statue's body was supported by a snake's coiled tail. There was nothing above the shoulder. The reason why one could tell that the upper body was that of a woman was because there was a pair of large and plump breasts exposed to the air on the naked upper body. Further up, the shoulders and head were damaged for some unknown reason. The flying shuttle they were on was not far from the giant statue. It looked like a tiny dot in comparison. Yu Qianqiu stared at it for a long time and suddenly asked, Xinyu, what does this statue mean? Song Yunxin and Ding Xiang also looked at Xinyu. They also did not know why this statue was standing there. Xinyu said respectfully, I don't know what it means. It is said that when Twilight City was discovered, this broken statue was here, but no one knows why. Then why is it called Twilight City? Yu Qianqiu continued to ask. Xingyu replied with a bitter smile. I don't know either. I don't know who first discovered this place. Anyway, the name Twilight City has been passed down for countless years, and no one can explain what it means. It's just a broken ruin. It doesn't matter what it is called. Why do you have to ask? Song Yunqin said impatiently. Yu Qianqiu nodded in agreement. Just as he was about to say that they should find a place to rest, he suddenly heard the sound of crashing waves in the distance. It was coming from the direction the statue was facing. Yu Qianqiu turned around and saw a strong wind blowing from afar. His clothes fluttered in the wind. He was sensitive to the humidity in the air and asked, Is there a lake in front? Ding Xiang laughed and said, It's not a lake. Not far from here is the Styx River. Twilight City is built on the bank of the Styx River. Jiuyu added, The place directly opposite Twilight City is the widest basin of the Styx River. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and glanced at Twilight City. From time to time, he could see people flying in from all directions. And he could also see people flying in all directions. His eyes finally fell on the exquisite giant statue. Although it was broken and had experienced countless years, it was still difficult to hide its vividness. The broken statue seemed to be using the whistling wind to tell something. Glory, sadness, or something else. Yu Qianqiu had this feeling. He listened attentively, but he could not understand the language of the wind. It could only be understood, but not expressed. However, he did not have such a high level of understanding, so he still got nothing. After a while, Yu Qianqiu turned to look at Song Yin and Ding Xiang. He smiled and said, I think both of you have a place to stay here. Where do you think you should stay? Song Yin was silent. Ding Xiang glanced at him. He could imagine how awkward it would be to protect his enemy in front of his fellow disciples. He chuckled and said, If you don't mind, you can stay at my hidden dragon villa for the time being. After that, he drove the flying shuttle around the giant sculpture and flew diagonally forward. The hidden dragon villa's foothold in Twilight City occupied a whole street. The street was not long. Perhaps it should be called an alley. Dozens of houses on both sides of the street were occupied by the people of the hidden dragon villa. It was unknown how many people lived there, but from the hundreds of people that Ding Xiang brought in front of the dragon transformation gate, it could be seen that there were at least more than 100 people. Elder Ding Xiang was sent by the hidden dragon mountain villa to guard this place. After he arranged for them to stay in a small stone house, he acted as if he had nothing to do with them. After exchanging some pleasantries with them, he said he had something to do and left. Even when Yu Qianqiu asked him to send someone to check on the situation of Mu Bing and the others, he politely refused. In fact, he did not want to get involved with these people anymore. He did not get to eat meat, and almost got himself into trouble. When they arrived at the destination, they naturally parted ways. Yu Qianqiu was concerned about the location where Mu Bing and the others were staying. He could not stay idle, and wanted to take Jiuyu out for a walk. How could Song Yin let him run around? It was known that this was a place where killing was not against the law. He had no choice but to follow. The three of them went out and shuttled through the maze-like streets. Yu Qianqiu looked around at the exotic stone buildings around him. In fact, the entire Twilight City was built with large and small stones. The shapes were similar. Although simple and elegant, it was a maze. The vicissitudes of life lingered on the streets. There were almost no pedestrians on the streets. Most of them were rising and falling in the air. After walking east and west for a few streets, even Song Yin and Jiuyu lost their way. The three of them had to fly into the air to find the direction. Yu Qianqiu looked around and finally found the place where Mu Bing and the others landed. He took the lead and flew over. Song Yin and Jiuyu looked at each other and immediately understood that he was still thinking about Mu Bing and the others. However, when they landed on the street, they found that it was a large main street. There were no less than 1,000 stone houses on both sides. There was no way to find where Mu Bing and the others lived. He couldn't possibly interrogate them one by one, right? It would be impolite to use their divine sense to investigate. This was the netherworld. Who knew who lived in the houses on both sides? Yu Qianqiu thought about it, and decided to ask Ding Xiang for help. He had already rejected Songyan Xian's request to ask the people from the Heartless Palace for help. He said that he had no obligation to do so, and Yu Qianqiu could not force him. Therefore, the three of them directly returned to the place where they came from. They broke into a house on the side, and asked a disciple of the Hidden Dragon Villa, where Ding Xiang was. The disciple knew that they were guests brought by Elder Ding, so he led them to Ding Xiang's residence. However, before they entered the door, they saw a large group of people in the sky. They landed on the roofs on both sides of the street, and surrounded the entire street. These people were all dressed in black armor, and had swords on their waists. They stared at the people below. Yu Qianqiu had seen the same people at the exit of the netherworld. The army of the dark underworld. A surprised voice was heard. The disciples of the Hidden Dragon Villa came out in shock. They looked at the people surrounding the entire street in shock. Ding Xiang naturally came out in shock too. He was not in the mood to care when he saw Yu Qianqiu and the others standing at the door. He walked to the street and looked around. Finally, he cupped his fists towards a person dressed like a general on the roof and said, "Oh, it's General Liu." He pointed to the people on the roofs and said, "The Hidden Dragon Villa has always strictly followed the rules of the netherworld. What is the meaning of this?" "Elder Ding, something has happened around here recently. I was ordered to investigate all suspicious people. I heard that you brought back 3 strangers. Please hand them over so that I can bring them back for interrogation," General Liu said coldly. Yu Qianqiu and the others looked at each other. He must be referring to the 3 of them. This. Ding Xiang looked at Greycloud Xian and the others who happened to be standing beside him. He immediately pointed to the 3 people on the roof and smiled bitterly. "General Liu, you've misunderstood. They are not suspicious. One of them is Great Priest Greycloud Xian of Heartless Palace. The other is Sect Master Yu Qianqiu of World Commerce. And the last one is from the River Styx tribe." "How dare you?" General Liu shouted coldly. "Ding Xiang, since when is it your Hidden Dragon Villa's turn to interfere with the army of the dark underworld? It's not up to you to decide whether they are suspicious or not. I will investigate everything. Guards, take the 3 of them away." He pointed at Greycloud Xian and the others. Ding Xiang immediately smiled bitterly at the 3 of them and slowly retreated, indicating that there was nothing he could do. A dozen soldiers immediately dashed down from the roofs. They even took out shackles and handcuffs and pressed towards the 3 of them. Yu Qianqiu was speechless as he dug his ears. He wasn't afraid, but he couldn't understand how he could be so unlucky as to encounter a game of soldiers catching thieves the moment he arrived. He didn't know what was going on around him, but strangers were being taken back for interrogation. Chapter 1036. Old Song. What do we do? Yu Qianqiu bared his teeth as he looked at the approaching soldiers. He knew almost nothing about the Onyx army, and he didn't know if this damn place would capture people at the drop of a hat. He could only ask for the Ash Cloud Letter's opinion first. It didn't matter if they were to arrest him for questioning. After all, an upright person was not afraid of a crooked shadow. However, if it was easy to be wrongly accused, then he would naturally resist. After all, the number of people who died unjustly was uncountable. It was meaningless for him to join the ranks of the dead. No one has ever used torture tools on Song Yunxin. Song Yunxin touched the storage bracelet on his left wrist with his right hand, and stared coldly at the general standing on the roof. "If you want to bring us in for questioning, we are willing to cooperate. However, if you want to use torture tools on us before we understand the situation, I will not allow it." After all, he had been to the netherworld and knew how powerful the shackles of the Onyx army were. Once they were bound, it would be very difficult to break them. If the other party wanted to play tricks on him, it would be equivalent to losing 90% of his strength. It was no different from seeking death. How could he allow himself to be restrained before he understood the situation? Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu immediately nudged the panicking Xinyu with his elbow, signaling him to get ready. Xinyu was now deeply depressed. He regretted setting up the Mirage Mist formation. Now trouble kept coming one after another. On the roof, General Lu said indifferently, "You want to resist? It's not really resistance. I've made myself very clear. If it's just a question, we will cooperate." Song Yunxi narrowed his eyes and said, "But everything has to be reasonable. If you're being unreasonable, our Heartless Palace's sword-drawing technique is not to be trifled with. You dare threaten the Onyx army?" General Lu's eyes flickered. "Do you believe that I can kill every single person of your Heartless Palace in the Netherworld with a single command from me?" Song Yunxi nodded slowly. "I believe you have that ability. However, I see that you're only a beginner Underworld Emperor. Do you believe that once I draw my sword, you won't even have the chance to give the order?" These words were indeed spoken with the demeanor of an expert, causing Yu Qianqiu to have a whole new level of respect for him. He actually dared to say such words to the general of the army of the Dark Underworld, which deterred the Underworld. However, after looking at the sky, he immediately understood why the old man was so stubborn. It was because he was riding a tiger and couldn't back down. At this time, there was already a large group of people standing in the air to watch the show. They were all attracted by the commotion here. The people here were all strange, and their clothes were all strange. The people of the Heartless Palace were also among them. When an elder of the Heartless Palace who was in charge realized that the main character of the commotion was actually the chief elder of the sect, he was instantly shocked. He hurriedly dodged and bowed to Qin Yin Xian. "Greetings, Great Deacon." Then he turned to General Lu on the roof and cupped his fists. "General Lu, I think there must be some misunderstanding. He is our sect's high priest, Song Yin Xian." General Lu's gaze fell on Song Yin Xian's hand that was stroking the storage bracelet. He said lightly, "Since the Heartless Palace can testify for you, there is no need for torture tools. However, an interrogation is inevitable. If the matter has nothing to do with you, we will naturally let you go. If it is related to you, even the head of the Heartless Palace will not be able to save you. Take him away." Since the other party had made a concession, Song Yin Xian had no other choice. After all, he still had to consider the Heartless Palace. As for Yu Qianqiu, he fully believed that Song Yin Xian would not harm him for the time being, so he made do with it. As for Xinyu, he naturally followed Yu Qianqiu's lead. In this way, under the watchful eyes of everyone, the three of them were surrounded by hundreds of soldiers of the army of the Dark Underworld, and were taken away. Twilight City was the underground trading place of the immortal Underworld and the Underworld. Naturally, there was a need for people to maintain order. An army of the Dark Underworld was stationed here. It could be said that they had the final say in Twilight City. Naturally, the location where they were stationed was the best in the city. It was the largest stone building on the edge of the central square. The building was majestic, and the curved arched door was wide open. Song Yin Xian and the other two entered the city guard's mansion, under the command of the soldier. Other people were isolated outside. The three of them were taken to the door of the prison behind the house, and immediately stopped in surprise. Looking at the thick metal fence, it was obviously a prison cell for prisoners. Song Yin Xian said in a deep voice, "What is the meaning of this?" The soldier who led the way said with a blank expression, "Nothing. In order to prevent anyone from escaping, no matter who it is, they must be detained here before the interrogation." The black metal door opened. Song Yin Xian hesitated for a while, but he thought that as long as his hands and feet were not bound, the prison should not be able to stop his three swords in one sword drawing style in case of an accident. He immediately took the lead and walked in. Going down the steps of the prison door, they went deep into the large underground prison. Walking in the prison corridor illuminated by fluorescent stones, one side was a thick stone wall, and the other side was a single cell made of metal fences that were as thick as a child's arm. The gaps between the metal bars were relatively tight, and there were also horizontal bars. At most only a fist could reach through the bars. The entire cage was a metal cage, It was likely that the metal bars were not ordinary items. Otherwise they would not be able to imprison a cultivator. The more the three walked, the more suspicious they became. The prison was empty, and they did not see any other prisoners. After walking through a few more empty cells, Yu Qianqiu was about to ask, but the soldiers who were holding them down stopped first. One of them opened the prison door and shouted, "Go in." The three of them were stunned when they saw the people who were imprisoned in the next cell. It was none other than Mu Bing and the others. They saw Dong Laishun, who was sitting cross-legged, stood up, dragging the handcuffs and leg shackles. He smiled at them and said, "I thought we were the most unlucky ones. I didn't expect Song Yun Xian and you to be detained. Haha, we are really in the same boat. Hey, that's not right." Dong Laishun's gaze swept over the men's hands and feet, and he immediately roared at the soldiers outside. Why aren't they wearing torture tools? The others also abruptly stood up and angrily rebuked the injustice, and the prison immediately echoed with their voices. The soldiers were expressionless, and they could not be bothered to pay them any attention. Song Yun Xian snorted, and did not say anything. Seeing that these people were also locked up, and their treatment was even worse, the three of them immediately dispelled their suspicions. Instead, they calmly walked into the cell. People were always like this. When they compared themselves, they would find their shortcomings. And when they compared themselves, they would find that they were quite good. Therefore, the most terrifying thing between people was to compare themselves with each other. Bang! After the soldier closed the door, he went to the next cell and opened it. He pointed at a person and said, "Go in order one by one. You come out first." The person who was pointed at walked out with a face full of indignation, and as soon as the door was closed, the soldier escorted him away. As the door to the dungeon disappeared with a clang, two cells separated by iron bars could be seen. On one side, there were 3 people, and on the other side, there were 5 people staring at each other. The side with fewer people was free and idle, while the side with more people had torture tools on their bodies. It was a lot more miserable. Yu Qianqiu looked around, and could not help but feel a little emotional. He did not know if it was fate with being in prison, but he could not remember how many times he had been in the palace in his previous life. Including this time in this life, it was already the 3rd time. The first time was in Ongquangsung's Spirit Stone Mine. The second time was in the prison of Lust City in the Eastern Holy Lands. The third time, which was also this time, was even more exaggerated. He actually came to the netherworld to be imprisoned. It was really like seeing a ghost. Could it be that he was born to be imprisoned? **T. Yu Qianqiu could not help but blurt out. It attracted everyone's attention, but no one understood what he was saying. When he turned around and saw everyone staring at him in confusion, Yu Qianqiu smiled and walked to the cell next door with his hands behind his back. He stared at Mu Bing, who was handcuffed and shackled, and said with a chuckle, "I say, Mu Bing, instead of being Great Commander Wu's father-in-law in the immortal world, you came here to be imprisoned. You really have a lot of fun." "Humph." Mu Bing snorted coldly. "Don't try to be sharp-tongued, or you'll be crying." Dong Laishun, who was at the side, immediately intervened between the two of them to be the peacemaker. He said, "Let's all talk less. Don't make a fuss at a time like this. If there's anything, let's talk when we get out." As he spoke, he tilted his head and secretly glared at Mu Bing. Mu Bing snorted coldly again and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and did not speak, as if he did not care about what was happening outside. Yu Qian chuckled in a melancholy manner and wandered around the small space in a leisurely manner. After a while, another 2 soldiers came and opened the cell next door again. One of them pointed at Mu Bing, who was sitting cross-legged, and shouted, "You, come out." Mu Bing stood up expressionlessly and walked out of the cell door, following the 2 soldiers. Just like this, every once in a while, a prisoner would be taken out of the cell next door. It was only when Dong Laishun cupped his hands at his cellmate and was taken away that the cell next door was completely empty. The 3 of them looked at each other. Needless to say, if they guessed correctly, it should be their turn next. As expected, not long after, 2 soldiers came and opened the cell door. One of the soldiers pointed at Xinyu and said, "You come out." Xinyu was instantly a little frightened. Yu Qianqiu patted his shoulder and smiled. "Don't be nervous, I have experience in this. You will get used to it after a few times. It's okay. You are from the River Styx's water tribe. They won't dare to do anything to you." Xinyu thought about it and went out obediently. After leaving the dungeon, he was immediately escorted to the main hall in the front yard. The spacious hall was simple and solemn. There were 4 soldiers holding swords standing on both sides, and the general with the surname Lu was sitting behind a stone table at the front. Xinyu stood in the hall trembling. As he was thinking about what the other party would ask, and how he should answer, he saw General Lu looking at him coldly and saying, "You are from the River Styx's water tribe. This has nothing to do with you. You can leave now." Xinyu was stunned. He did not expect that General Lu would let him go without even asking him a question. Before he could regain his senses, a soldier in the hall shouted, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and leave. Do you want to stay and be punished?" Xinyu did not dare to stay any longer. He immediately bowed and hurriedly walked out of the city guard's mansion. Chapter 1037. Many people gathered outside the city guard's mansion to watch the show. No one knew why the Onyx army was going through so much trouble. When they saw that Jiyu was the first to come out, they were surprised but felt that it was reasonable. After all, he was from the River Styx's water tribe. The Onyx army would not dare to touch him. Otherwise, they would be breaking the ancient rule. By then, even Madame Blackpool would not be able to protect them. The heartless palace elder in charge here was He Junquang. When he saw Jiyu come out, he immediately went over and cupped his hands at Jiyu. "I am He Junquang, the heartless palace elder. Song Yun Xian, who went in with you, is the chief high priest of our sect. We are from the same sect. May I know your name?" "River Styx's water tribe, Jiyu." Jiyu replied politely. "So it's Mr. Ji." He Junquang cupped his hands and asked politely, "You all went in together, but Mr. Ji was the first to come out. Can you tell me what happened inside? Is our high priest safe and sound?" "He's temporarily imprisoned inside. He's fine for now," Jiyu suddenly exclaimed. He looked around and did not see Mu Bing and the others. He asked suspiciously, "You said I'm the first to come out?" "That's right. Is there a problem?" He Junquang did not dare to be careless. If anything happened to Song Yun Xian here, he would not be able to escape responsibility. The dark and skinny Jiyu frowned. "Before I came out, there were already 6 people who came out to be interrogated. Did none of them come out? Why didn't I see them go back? Where did they go?" He Junquang smiled worriedly. "The city guard's mansion is so big. They should be somewhere else for now. It's probably because you're from the River Styx's water tribe, so they don't dare to do anything to you. That's why they let you out first." Jiyu's frown eased and he nodded slightly. He felt that was the case. In the dungeon, 2 soldiers came again. They opened the cell door and pointed at Song Yun Xian. "It's your turn. Come out." Just as Grey Cloud Xian walked to the door, he paused and looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was alone in the cell. He frowned and said, "Why do you have to go back and forth so troublesome? Just call him, and we'll go out together." What he was worried about now was what would happen if someone tried to kill Yu Qianqiu while he was away. It was not that he treasured Yu Qianqiu's life, but if Yu Qianqiu died, his own life would come to an end. The soldier immediately shouted, "Of course there are rules for interrogation. How can we give you a chance to collude on the spot? We have to interrogate you one by one. Don't dawdle, go quickly." Song Yunxin thought about it and agreed, but he was still worried about Yu Qianqiu's safety. Yu Qianqiu walked to the door with a smile and said, "Old Song, you go first." "I have some relationship with Lady Blackpool, so I don't think these little pawns would dare to do anything to me." As soon as he said that, the 2 soldiers looked at each other in surprise. Grey Cloud Xian was also slightly startled. He looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. He didn't know when Yu Qianqiu had gotten involved with Madame Blackpool. Even so, he still released his divine sense to scan the entire dungeon. After confirming that there was no one else, he left with the two soldiers with a little relief. After leaving the dungeon, he was sent to the main hall in the front room, just like Xinyu. One of the soldiers who escorted him quickly walked to the side of the general, who was sitting calmly in the hall. He lowered his head slightly, obviously transmitting his voice to the general. General Lu was taken aback for a moment. Then he sneered and said, "What a joke! Madam is of high status and power. How could she have any relationship with him? Don't pay attention to his nonsense." The soldier seemed to want to say something, but he eventually shut his mouth and retreated. Song Yunxin, who was standing in the hall, had already guessed that they were talking about Yu Qianqiu. In fact, he did not take Yu Qianqiu's words seriously. Just think about it. He had never seen Lady Blackpool or heard that she had been to the immortal realm before. On the other hand, it was clearly Yu Qianqiu's first time in the netherworld realm. How could he have any relationship with Lady Blackpool? If he really had such a great reputation, he would not have ended up like this. Suddenly, Song Yunxin stared at the person sitting high in the hall and said in a deep voice, "Ask anything. I will tell you everything I know." General Lu nodded slightly, then tilted his head and said, "Call He Zhenquang of Heartless Palace in." One of his subordinates immediately ran out. Song Yunxin looked at the hall in confusion. Not long after, He Zhenquang followed his subordinate into the hall. He gave Song Yunxin a once-over, and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that he was unharmed. He cupped his fists and said, "Greetings, High Deacon." He then cupped his fists and said, "General Lu, may I know what you have summoned me for?" General Lu was still wearing his armor. He sat behind the stone table in a dignified manner. After staring at the two of them for a while, he casually picked up a jade archive from the table and looked at it. After a long while, he put it down and looked at the people below. He asked, "He Zhenquang, are you certain that he is the chief high deacon of your heartless palace, Song Yunxin?" Song Yunxin's gaze turned cold. He thought that General Lu was up to something again. He Zhenquang quickly replied, "General Lu, what do you mean by that? If he isn't my sect's high deacon, I wouldn't have needed to step forward. That makes things easier. I'll take it that your heartless palace is vouching for him." General Lu placed his arms on the table and stared at the people below. He said indifferently, "Since you're the one who vouched for him, I won't ask any more questions. However, I'll be frank. If I find out that he has anything to do with the matter I'm investigating, don't blame me for being rude to your heartless palace." He Zhenquang stole a glance at Song Yunxin. He didn't know what was going on around him, nor did he know if it had anything to do with Song Yunxin. He couldn't make up his mind if he wanted to use the lives of everyone from Heartless Palace in the underworld as collateral. He needed someone more experienced to make the decision. Truth be told, Song Yunxin himself didn't even know what was going on around him. He was caught in a daze. However, there was one thing he could guarantee. Whatever happened around him had nothing to do with him. He sneered, "You don't have to threaten me. I didn't do anything around here on my way here." Since the High Deacon had said that, He Zhenquang wouldn't be blamed if anything happened. He nodded and said, "My heartless palace is willing to vouch for High Deacon." "That's great." General Lu waved his hand and said, "Since I've vouched for him, you can leave now." The matter was easily resolved. He Zhenquang cupped his hands to express his gratitude. Then, he turned to Song Yunxin and extended his hand toward the door. "High Deacon, please. No hurry." Song Yunxin pressed his hand down and stared at the door. He said in a deep voice, "Yu Qianqiu traveled with me. I can guarantee that he didn't do anything around here. Please let him go. The innocent are innocent, and the guilty are innocent. I have to follow all the necessary procedures. Otherwise, wouldn't I be suspected of corruption? I will treat High Deacon Song's words as testimony. If there's nothing wrong, I will naturally let him go. Please don't interfere with my interrogation." General Lu extended his hand toward the door and said, "I won't see you out." Song Yunxin's eyes turned cold. He wanted to stay and wait for Yu Qianqiu to come out. However, a bitter expression flashed across He Zhenquang's face. How could the upper echelons of the sect know the difficulties of the subordinates outside? The Dark Nether Army had already given him enough face by making concessions. If he continued to contradict them, his days here would be difficult. After all, this was their territory. The Dark Nether Army would definitely make things difficult for him. If he couldn't handle the matters here well, he wouldn't be able to explain to the sect. He coughed and cupped his hands toward Song Yunshin. "Hi, Deacon. We might as well wait outside the door." Song Yunshin was slightly startled. He was also someone who often worked outside. He was not ignorant of the difficulties of the subordinates like He Junquang thought. After thinking about it, there shouldn't be any problems. He glanced at General Liu, who was sitting high above, then turned and strode out. He Junquang breathed a sigh of relief, cupped his hands again, and quickly followed. As soon as they left the city guard mansion, they saw a group of people watching the show. Xinyu, who was in the crowd, hurriedly walked over to Song Yunshin and asked, "How is Yu Qianqiu?" In fact, as soon as Song Yunshin was escorted out of the dungeon, Mu Bing and the others, led by Dong Lai Shun, came out of a house not far away. The shackles on their hands and feet were long gone. The two soldiers accompanying them quickly gestured for the guards to open the cell door. The group quickly entered the dungeon. Inside the cell, Yu Qianqiu was bored alone. He paced around the small space with his hands behind his back, his head lowered and his brows furrowed as he thought about some problems. He wasn't worried about any accidents at all. With his ability, this cell could trap other cultivators, but it was useless against him. He could leave at any time, and it was no different from a piece of paper. Clang! The sound of the cell door opening pulled him back from his thoughts. It was probably time for him to go to court. However, he heard footsteps along the way. It wasn't like before, where there were only 2 soldiers. There seemed to be 7 or 8 people. While he was pondering, the 7 or 8 people had already arrived in front of the cell. They were all familiar faces, and they were all sneering at him. They looked at him, as if he was a pig that was about to be slaughtered. Mu Bing, who was in the crowd, laughed evilly and said, "Yu Qianqiu, I told you that no matter how sharp-tongued you are, there will be a time when you cry. Even in your dreams, you probably never imagined that this moment would come so quickly." Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He saw that the shackles on their hands and feet were gone, and that the 2 soldiers were fighting on the side. With his experience in this area, he immediately guessed the cause and effect. He knew that he had fallen into a trap. The corner of his mouth curled up slightly, and he said, "It is indeed a good plan. Step by step, you paralyzed us and successfully made us lower our guard. Finally, as you wished, Song Yunshin was lured away." His gaze then fell on Mu Bing, and he sneered with unusual disdain. "Mu Bing, it's not that I look down on you, but with that pig brain of yours and that little bit of knowledge of yours, you can't come up with such an overt scheme. So, what the F***ck are you so proud of?" Chapter 1038. These words were a resounding slap to the face. Every word was like a sharp blade, stabbing into his heart. This was because this method was indeed not thought of by him. His words were like a sharp blade, stabbing into the pit of his heart. He could not pull it out even if he wanted to. Thus his face turned green. He simply had no reason to refute Yu Qianqiu. He could only gnash his teeth and speak with a sinister expression. "Yu Qianqiu, I'll let you know what it means to be unable to live or die. Beg for death." Yu Qianqiu sneered. "Don't worry. No matter who I beg for, it won't come to you." He raised his hand and pinched his little finger. "Who in the 3 realms doesn't know that you're a bastard who sells his daughter for glory? Poor Mu Tianjiao traded her body for this vanity, but you don't cherish it. You even want to show it off. Are you afraid that others don't know how shameless you are? Why don't you think about it? With your little ability, how could you find so many people to help you?" Previously, he was still worried about Wu Xiong's face and didn't want to scold the couple. But now that things had come to this, the dagger was revealed. The other party had already made it clear that they wanted to take his little life. Even if he showed mercy, it wouldn't be worth a fart. Now it was either you die or I live. There was no way out. Capture him alive! Capture him alive! I want to kill him with my own hands. Mu Bing roared as he pointed at the cell. He really couldn't find words more vicious than Yu Qianqiu's to scold Yu Qianqiu. The others looked at him with a hint of pity. Since you know he has a sharp tongue, why do you keep jumping out to provoke him? Today, I want to see who will kill who. Yu Qianqiu sneered. There was no wind in the cell, but his clothes suddenly fluttered. Boundless killing intent instantly exploded. Do you want to fight like a cornered beast? You overestimate yourself. Dong Shunlai maintained his smile, but his hands suddenly elongated and shot out like two thin bamboo poles. With a whoosh, they passed through the cage, and the two palms at the front suddenly turned into two sharp claws. One clawed at Yu Qianqiu's head, and the other clawed at Yu Qianqiu's chest. He wanted to kill Yu Qianqiu in one strike. He did not care whether Mu Bing wanted to capture him alive or not. He wanted to settle the matter first, otherwise, there would be trouble. It wasn't easy to trick Grey Cloud Xian into leaving, and they couldn't afford to waste too much time. If they waited for Grey Cloud Xian to react and rush over, and they still hadn't left, then none of them would be able to leave. The Heartless Palace's 3-in-1 sword drawing style was no joke. The sneak attack of an expert at the initial stage of the Netherworld Emperor was so fast that Yu Qianqiu couldn't dodge it. However, his opponents outnumbered him, and all of them were highly skilled swordsmen. How could he not be prepared when facing them alone? Thousands of purple flame high-energy sabers had been secretly arranged around his body under the cover of the explosive murderous aura. Kill! Yu Qianqiu yelled fiercely. Thousands of invisible purple flame high-energy sabers spun and attacked at the same time. Puff puff. A series of tearing sounds could be heard. The two pairs of ghostly claws that were as fast as lightning were shredded into thousands of pieces, falling to the ground and turning into wisps of gray smoke. Ugh! Dong Shunlai let out a muffled groan. The pair of ghostly claws that had been shredded quickly retracted and grew back at a visible speed. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he glanced around the prison. His pair of ghostly claws were extremely sharp and hard. How could they be destroyed by ordinary objects? He could clearly feel that the prison was filled with sharp objects of extreme yang, which were simply his natural nemesis. Not only him, but the others were also startled. They didn't expect that Dong Shunlai, who was at the initial stage of the Netherworld Emperor, would suffer a great loss in just one round. When the 1,000 purple flame high-energy sabers were brandished, the terrifying energy surged forward, making the ghosts and monsters of the underworld tremble with fear. Since he had already attacked, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't show any mercy based on his personality. His 5 fingers stretched out like claws toward the outside of the prison, and he yelled fiercely again. Kill! Thousands of purple flame high-energy sabers shot out like a rain of swords from the metal bars. However, the surprise effect had already disappeared. Dong Shunlai's new pair of ghostly claws quickly pushed out, and a black translucent wall of light immediately blocked in front of him. Immediately, the outline of the flying daggers appeared on the wall of light, and it began to protrude forward. Dong Shunlai resisted the rainstorm like purple flame high-energy sabers with his powerful cultivation. However, the black transparent wall of light was gradually being broken through. Dong Shunlai said hurriedly, "This kid's item is the nemesis of my meditation cultivation. I can't hold on much longer. You guys should kill him while I'm blocking his treasure." He still thought that Yu Qianqiu had used some kind of treasure. The dumbfounded crowd immediately came back to their senses. Mu Bing was terrified. He didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so powerful that even an expert in the preliminary stage of the Netherworld Emperor realm couldn't hold on much longer. Mu Bing was slowly moving to one side, showing signs of fleeing. However, Yu Qianqiu's trump cards came one after the other. It was fine if he didn't reveal them, but once he revealed them, they were all extraordinary. How could an ordinary expert block them? If he didn't have a trump card, he wouldn't have dared to run around. Now that he had been attacked, he couldn't pretend to be a coward anymore. If he still showed mercy, he would be a pig, unless he didn't want to live anymore. For a moment, Yu Qianqiu didn't conceal his murderous intent at all. Seeing his opponents about to gang up on him, and Mu Bing showing signs of fleeing, Yu Qianzhou's eyes widened. How could he let Mu Bing run away? Kill! With the third roar, Yu Qianzhou pushed out his palms fiercely, as if he wanted to rush out of the cage. His whole body emitted a dazzling purple light, and thousands of flying swords of purple flames shot out from his body, covering the entire area and attacking indiscriminately. Within such a short distance, the metal fence in front of Yu Qianzhou was instantly smashed into pieces by the sharp flying swords of purple flames. What were these things? The crowd turned pale with fright. They didn't expect these flying swords to be so sharp. They had thought that after they trapped Yu Qianzhou in the dungeon, Yu Qianzhou was no different from a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. However, they found out that the narrow space also limited their chances of escaping. The swarming purple flying swords closed in on a large area like a bowl cover. It was obvious that his opponent wanted to kill them all at once. The only place he could escape to was the wall behind him. The black wall of light that blocked the purple flame high-energy blade couldn't stop the indiscriminate bombardment of the flying swords of purple flames, and was instantly smashed to pieces. Dong Shunlai could no longer laugh, and his face was full of shock. He didn't know that if he was a cultivator from the immortal world, he might be able to block it with his profound cultivation. However, these flying swords of pure yang were the bane of meditation cultivators, and it was very difficult for him to block them with his current cultivation. There was a loud boom behind him as the other meditation cultivators worked together to blast a large hole in the wall. It was a few hundred meters deep, and the plaza outside collapsed as a large hole appeared. Almost at the same time that the hole appeared, Yu Qianzhou spread his fingers and used the earth's secret art. The hole collapsed with a boom, almost burying those who wanted to enter it alive. Yu Qianzhou had clearly gone berserk. He wanted to trap everyone with a mere minor immortal cultivation, and fight so many experts by himself. Ah! A miserable scream came from the other side. Mu Bing's cultivation was low, and he didn't have time to dodge at such a close distance. Several flying swords pierced through his intestines, and he fell to the ground. Help! He cried out, but no one had the time to care about him. The ground wriggled and swallowed him whole. Everything seemed to have happened slowly, but in fact, everything happened very quickly. It happened in the blink of an eye. Die! Dong Shunlai roared, and his tyrannical cultivation erupted on the spot. Fierce astral energy instantly swept toward the flying swords of purple flames. He punched out with both fists, and a solid astral energy shot toward Yu Qianzhou. Immediately, the weakness of Yu Qianzhou's low cultivation was exposed. If the flying swords of purple flames had been used by an immortal emperor, they would have died for sure. However, Yu Qianzhou's cultivation was far too low compared to theirs. The fierce chaotic wind disturbed the flying swords on the spot, especially the chaotic wind formed by his fists with the cultivation of the early stage of the underworld emperor. The chaotic wind blasted the flying swords of the purple flames away in all directions. The cultivation of the early stage of the netherworld emperor realm was not child's play. Once it was displayed, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The entire dungeon collapsed in an instant, and for a moment, the earth and rocks became a blur, and the sound of rumbling could be heard. At the place where the two fists landed, the metal fences were directly broken, and the wall behind them was instantly blasted away by the unparalleled power. On the ground outside, in a straight line of 1,000 meters, all the houses made of boulders were blown into the sky by the tremendous force. A deep trench appeared on the ground. Then, countless rocks and stones fell from the sky like rain. People were fleeing in all directions. Those with low cultivation bases were not able to dodge in time. They were directly smashed into meat paste by the aftershock of the two fists that came out from the ground. A golden light suddenly appeared and wrapped around Yu Qianzhou, but he was still blasted into the hole behind him like a meteor by the heavy fists. Capture him and use him as a hostage. Dong Shunlai waved his hand, sweeping away the falling rocks and soil, creating a short gap. He snorted coldly and dashed towards the hole he had created in the ground, chasing after them. When the others saw that the purple flame flying sword wasn't unstoppable, their confidence was boosted. and they almost followed suit. The 7 of them chased after Yu Qianqiu. In the blink of an eye, the people who were watching the commotion outside the city guard's mansion were startled by a loud noise. A large hole suddenly appeared in the square behind them, and rocks and stones flew everywhere like rain. Most of the people immediately hid in the air. Waiting outside the door, Songyun Xian wasn't a fool. He realized that he had fallen into a trap after thinking for a while. It seemed that someone had made a move in the dungeon. Bang! Songyun Xian was extremely angry, and his thunderous roar shook the minds of the onlookers in the sky. Shen Yu and He Zhengquang, who were next to him, took a few steps back. Blood even seeped out of their mouths and noses, and their faces instantly turned pale. As soon as Songyun Xian dodged into the sky, he heard another loud boom behind the dungeon. 100-meter deep, 1,000-meter-long trench suddenly appeared. The houses that were built on top of the trench were instantly blown into the sky, and the onlookers dodged in all directions, screaming miserably. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.